Yeah, you should say right last minute. Ready?
Yep.
Okay, everyone ready? Okay, so I'll call the Select Board meeting of June 14th, 2018 to order, and I will call the Essex Junction Trustee meeting to order. And I'd like to invite everyone to rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It is my day today, so. I'd like to welcome everyone to tonight's meeting. It's a joint meeting between the Select Board and the Village Trustees. I'm glad to see you all in the audience there. So, Mr. Municipal Manager, do we have any additions and changes tonight?
Very good, we do.
Just handed out copies to your sheet. It's part of the item 5A, the extension of memorandum of agreement for consolidation of public works services. There are some modifications, track changes from the reviewed by town and village attorney based on some feedback from the trustee meeting on Tuesday night.
Okay, so that's
No new agenda items.
No new agenda items. This just came in today.
okay. So that's part of 5A then.
Yes.
Okay, very good. And that's it. Okay, then for the Select Board, can I get a motion to approve the change of the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Thank you, Irene. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Elaine. Okay, all those in favor of amending the agenda, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And I'll make the same motion for the trustees that we amend the agenda as discussed.
Second.
Who seconded? Andrew?
Dan did.
Dan did? Okay, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Well,
Okay, next item on the agenda is public to be heard. That's a time for the public to speak to the Select Board and the trustees on any item that's not on the agenda. Is there anyone here tonight wishing to speak to public to be heard? If you could state your name. Also, if you haven't signed in yet, please be sure you do so we have that for the minutes. Paula, you just state your name for the record.
This is just a point of order from me. I
Paula
have something
DeMichael?
to say that's related to the goal, so I assume that I will say it when you get to that one.
Yes, if you have something about the goals,
Okay,
yes.
And does this work so that after you've had your discussion, then I give whatever?
Yeah, we'll make sure that you have an opportunity to speak at
Okay.
that time if that,
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Is there anyone else wishing to speak on anything not on the agenda? I did want to mention that Mike Flagman is not here tonight. He's on vacation. He did call in. He was on vacation at the last Select Board meeting, but called in, but tonight he's unavailable to do that, so it'll be the four of us here tonight. Okay, if there's nothing else for public to be heard, then we're going to move on to our first item of business, which is the joint meeting with 5A, and that's extension of the memorandum of agreement for consolidation of public works services. And Evan, did you want to kick that one off?
Well, just passed out is a revised version of the agreement. It had gone to the Select Board last week and to the Village Board, and there have been comments that were asked to change some language in specifically, you'll see that on the first page, there's a couple of changes to the whereases. And then really what it does is, it was on the vague side as to the powers of the manager, and having it be more that the alignment efforts, whatever makes you happy, Mike. By the way, there is no good side. So the powers of the manager, it could have been read that the manager was to go off and consolidate the public works departments and town highway without coming necessarily back to both boards. And so there's clarifying language that this is a process by which staff will come back to both boards for approvals of any further actions in public works of consolidation. But there are also some recommendations in there of some work items to be done in the next couple of years, which would get us prepared for a future consolidation should, and give the boards a preview of what a staff recommendation of what it would look like. And so those are some changes. This document was co-authored by the town attorney and the village attorney. So this is their agreed upon language. Both of them feel that they've addressed the comments for the most part as they could that have been brought up. So with that, we're open to a discussion, and any said corrections could then be done and brought back at a future meeting.
Okay. Evan, normally we get this in our packet and we have time to digest it. Since this was at our table here, would you be willing to just go, since it's I appreciate the tracked change copy, to just go over, there's not that many tracked changes. Could you go over that, maybe give us just a quick,
Sure.
background for each of the specifics, and then I think we can have a better discussion.
So, let's see, 1, 2, it is the second whereas. It used to say that, whereas the town select board and village trustees approved the final report of the review committee dated October 2nd, 2017, that recommended full consolidation of the village and town public works departments. It used to, the original said based on incremental steps and recommendations contained in the report. It now says, beginning with a process of studies and reviews. So the actual basis of this First Amendment is to establish a process to study and review the things that would be necessary for future consolidation. We then go down a little bit further.
Evan, actually, before we go on there, maybe since the trustees had a chance to discuss this and have their changes, maybe we can just make sure that the select board is okay with each of these changes too, at
Sure.
the time you describe those.
Well, the village board has not had a chance to see these changes.
Ah.
They have made commentary like you had an opportunity to
I'm sorry.
last week. You may want to discuss these changes as I bring them up.
Yeah.
That's fine as a process.
Okay.
That way we can tick them off one by one,
Right.
get to the end, and if there's anything left yet unresolved or have questions for legal, I can get those done and we'll bring this to the next meeting.
Okay, so then why don't we do that then, for this first change and see if everybody's okay with that, or if they have comments? Leave it up to the boards. Anybody?
I think I could maybe abbreviate to just for the select board's sake, what some of the sort of the key issues. The original agreement said, as you recall, last October, we accepted the report, but we did not approve the report. It's a subtle difference. We accepted the report, but there were a lot of recommendations in the report that were pretty sweeping, that would have probably touched on policy areas. And so we wanted to make it clear that we accepted, we didn't find any of the recommendations unacceptable, but we weren't quite ready to see every single recommendation that was in the report immediately implemented. And then the second piece was in paragraph 2, the original one said the manager shall have authority to address the select board and trustees' approved recommendations. And again, we sort of said, well, wait, we didn't approve the recommendations, we accepted the recommendations. And address, the village attorney felt that address maybe could be interpreted as implement. So that seemed to say we're giving administration full authority autonomously to implement recommendations that we approved. And we didn't approve recommendations, and we kind of feel that there should be more of a public oversight of any big sweeping consolidations that take place.
Mhm.
And we thought you'd probably agree with that.
And approval by both boards
Right.
of any sweeping consolidations, not just what the unified manager believes he has a mandate to do, or she.
Thanks, you.
So we'll have two bites at the apple then, because before they get lined up and ready to be implemented, we'll get a chance to look at them, and then
Right.
Yes.
the budget process, which enables these, we'll also
Correct.
get a chance to look at it
And any,
and take a
and-
second shot.
yes, and any of these changes would require the moving of people or positions or equipment or et cetera, which is a budgetary issue, which is a policy decision, which is past my authority. It wasn't clear in the writing of that document of that move. And as I would say to you, and I have before, there's one thing on what I could say to you, and then there's another thing that's written in agreement of what my powers are. But I acknowledge that there was a little bit of confusion, and any of these reviews, processes, and next steps would certainly have to come to both boards.
Okay, even though it's really is in your authority as the manager.
Yes.
To do
Yes.
this. But I think this is a good check and balance as we move forward together.
Right.
To be sure we're all on the same page.
And I think all of that would hold true for any future endeavors with the departments that are not yet consolidated. Obviously, there's Parks and Rec, there's Fire Department, there's libraries. This may be a template for future actions. And certainly not have to rewrite every agreement completely differently. It could be a good template.
Okay, thanks, Ed. So how do we want to do this? Do we want to do it step by step? And all these track changes?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's not that many of them.
So are we gonna discuss them as we go, or go through them and go through with the?
Well, what would you like to do? I was thinking we could do it as, we got the overview of what it is, and now we're going to get the details of it. And we could discuss it as we, for each of the changes if you'd like, but it's up to the board.
So I'm okay with this change that we just discussed.
Okay. All right, everybody else do?
Yes.
Okay, awesome.
Okay.
All right,
So let's go on to page 2. It is the fourth whereas. And we'll start on page 1, whereas the town and village further agreed that both an extension of time is needed to achieve full consolidation of the public works departments of the town and the village, and further, it used to say actions, that got struck, studies and reviews are needed to better align the departments prior to full consolidation. So basically, struck the word action and changed it for studies and reviews.
Top of page 2 of 5.
Got it.
Top of page 2.
Everybody good with that, too? Yep. All right, great, let's keep going.
I don't believe there's any changes below that. Terms stayed the same. Number 1, recommendations of review committee. The unified manager, referred to as the municipal manager in the agreement, which is the original, shall be responsible for directing staff, any outside experts and/or others as may be needed to, it used to say, address the select board and trustees' approved recommendations, which George just mentioned, and it's changed to, or others as may be needed to conduct the reviews and studies set forth. In the report, that is attached here too as attachment A. In a timely manner, and shall provide periodic reports to the town and village on the progress being made to conduct the studies and reviews contained in the report. That's new language, versus study or implement the recommendations.
Okay.
So back to, it's really about conducting studies and reviews that were contained in the report of October 2nd.
Okay. Everybody good with that, too?
Yes, I'm just concerned about the numbering. I see numbers that are being crossed out
Yeah.
and rearranged, and I don't know what that means. I thought it was appropriately numbered in the draft that we looked at.
It could just be a formatting.
It's still
When and if this is approved, we will make sure it's in correct formatting.
Billy?
I recall at our trustee meeting a conversation that I don't think we finished about the length of the amendment, about the length of the agreement, and we have 5 years here. I don't remember the conclusion of our conversation. I don't think we really came to a conclusion, and I don't see a change to that paragraph. So I would like to either at this point or at the end, when we're done reviewing the other changes, just review with both boards whether we're comfortable with a 5-year term.
Well, because of what's added at the end there with the termination clause, maybe it sort of makes that moot in a way.
Yeah.
Yes and no. I have thoughts about
Okay.
that paragraph too.
Okay.
Okay. Number 3, other tasks. In addition, let's go with that. Other tasks. In addition to, the word "the" is struck, to furthering the studies, reviews, and other recommendations contained in the report, the unified manager shall create a plan for consolidation of public works, comma, to be presented to the town select board and village trustees for approval, comma, which shall also include the following items. There is an A, B, C, and D. Those items did not change from the original document. So that would be the changes to number 3.
Okay, everybody okay on the other tasks? Right? All right. Okay. Move on.
Do you want me to read those, or?
No.
Everybody good? Okay.
Yeah, we're good with
4.
other tasks.
Time frame for completion of studies and reports. No time frame has been set in this amendment 1 for completion of specific tasks, reports, studies. It is agreed that full consolidation of the public works departments is a priority to the town and the village, and the tasks, here's the change, and studies described in the report and referenced in this amendment shall, in this amendment 1, shall be prioritized, period. Reports on at least a quarterly basis shall be provided by the unified manager or his designee to the town select board and the village trustees on progress that is being made on the tasks, there's a change, and studies, period.
That's pretty simple, is that? Everybody okay with that? Good.
Number 5, termination. Either party shall have the right to terminate the agreement and this amendment 1 upon a minimum of 90 days' notice to the other party, period. Should either party choose to terminate the agreement and this amendment 1, comma, both parties shall cooperate in either continuing to maintain the existing coordinated public works department services in the same manner as existing at the time of the termination notice, or, comma, if directed by the town of Essex Select Board or the village of Essex trustees, shall separate any services or functions in the, and here's the change, in the following fiscal year. Now,
Wasn't that all new?
Yeah.
yes, it's all new.
It's all new,
It's
right?
all new,
That
but
whole
there's also a
termination.
new change
Okay.
of the language. And the reason for the change is, you can have a 90-day notice, except so many things are intertwined budget-wise and taxation-wise, you really couldn't make it any changes effective until the next budget following year. And that's why we have attorneys, because they caught that.
Okay. So this is potential, Elaine?
I have one grammatical question, a change on the second to last line of that paragraph. Town of Essex Select Board or the Village of Essex Junction trustees. My concern about this is if directed by the Town of Essex Select Board or the Village of Essex trustees and approved by voters, we can direct that things be separated, but the budget process, if we're separating, I'm assuming that that means we're returning the village public, if we're not gonna keep it, the existing coordinated public works in the manner existing at the time of the termination, we're separating services or functions, there may be a budgetary aspect of that which would require the cost of public works for the village to be separated from the town budget and added back into the village budget. So that would require a vote. So you can't predict the future, and I don't know if that would happen, but I think we could say just a quick phrase like, and as approved by voters as necessary or as warranted or something like that.
Well, kind of all this stuff has to be approved during the budget process by the voters.
Right,
Anyway.
but when we initially started this, we asked for a vote for the village trustee, or for the village residents, and the town voted to bring that budget into their budget. So it was a special item, it wasn't just approving the budget. Was it a special
We
item?
didn't do that. We didn't.
On the select board,
So we just approved it during the regular budget
just
process?
explained it to the voters.
Mm,
Right.
okay.
Right, so in the following fiscal year, wouldn't that be the vote?
Right.
So that's
Right,
implied.
right.
That's,
Okay.
I mean, we could spell it out, but that's
It's
implied to
implied.
me, that's still, I
Yeah.
mean, they may say absolutely not, and then we have to figure out what we're gonna do. Right?
I guess, I think it's a cautionary tale that your actions will have to go through a budgetary process and understand what may be involved with that. And therefore, if you're planning on giving notice, either party, I would suggest some type of a council of what's the agreement, is there a solution, and if it's dissolution of the agreement, that would be a final action, but you should know in advance what you'd be facing. But I think the wording is correct, and yes, you would have to go to the voters that town and village meeting.
Okay. Actually, Irene had her hand up.
I also want to add the word junction, so we already talked about
Okay.
things.
And
So, when we talk about budgets, though, the votes are at different times. And so the concern, I mean, I guess a couple of things I'm trying to get to, I guess. One is, you know, the select board works on the budget through the entire month of January. We put it together, we warn it, we have public hearings, you do all the things that we do to get the budget ready for town meeting. Is there any concern about do we need to have any language in there that says when during a fiscal year? I mean,
I appreciate that. I think you're onto something, because
if something horrible
if
happens.
you did it like June 1st, it would be horrific.
Right, because you've got 30 days.
Right,
and you can't-
versus say October 1st or
Right,
something
right.
in the budget lead-up time. We would much rather know as we were going into the
Into
budget
a
season
budget season.
versus the last.
Right, so just the timing of when such a decision gets made could have major implications, right?
Would you like
So
staff to,
So I'm wondering, right, do we need to have some sort of language in there that says,
by January 1st?
Or for the next budget
Yeah.
process, for the
Yeah.
next vote. I mean, can we be clear and say for
Yeah,
the next?
right, so
I
that
mean,
could be, so
we
it could be a
would
year and a
literally-
half, so
I
it could
would
be a
say-
year and a half later that
It might
it is
be.
implemented.
I defer to others who have come through the process. Greg, I'd say by December 1st, we would need to know.
Yeah.
That'd be the
Yeah.
latest.
Yeah.
That'd be a
Right, right.
heck of a monkey wrench after December 1st.
Right.
It'd be by the way, it would be a heck of a monkey wrench
Period.
anytime,
Yes.
but certainly after December 1st
Right.
through the town and village meetings. And so if you want us to block off that period, we could find the right language.
That's what I think we need to think about,
I
right?
think that's what Dean is hitting.
It can't be the
Now-
next fiscal year if it happens after December
Right.
1st.
Since you've opened up the door a little bit, let me, now that I've got a little clearer thought on this. You have several different abilities, okay? You can leave things as is as of the day of the agreement.
Right.
What that means is, all the things that are done to date today, tomorrow, the next day, 2 years from now, stay in place. And it could stay in place in perpetuity, per the agreement until such time of change. And then there's the next step, which is we don't like the agreement really much at all, wipe it all out and redo it, or we don't like this piece, let's change that piece. And so you have those different steps sort of contained within the freedom of the language of the agreement. So, total change, we need as much time into the next budget year to try to figure out separation and its implications in budget to both communities. Minor changes, obviously, we need less time to deal with that. And then leave it as is as the day of deciding to stop, but keep what we've built to date. Obviously, no changes needed, but nothing further is going ahead, if that makes sense.
It does make sense.
So, Andy, I don't know, you're very good. Do you have you want to give it a couple minutes to think of some cutoff dates to put in here, or do you want staff to do it?
I'm fine with you doing it, but I heard December 1st, but it's still.
That was a guess.
You can certainly,
November?
Go ahead, discuss it.
October is when the village starts, and
Right.
it would be an impact on both budgets, so
Right.
I would say October 1st.
October
Yeah, I
1st.
think that's.
Yeah.
And then, so by October 1st of any year, we need to know.
Yeah. In order to implement it into the following fiscal year.
Okay. So then if I know we have a little bit, we have one more line to go, and then
I don't think there are any more changes, are there?
So
Andy just had another thought, right?
Andy, sorry.
So the other shoe to drop here is that there's the town vote, because we say we have to go to a vote, the town vote is on a different date than the village vote. So one could say yes and the other could say no in either order. Also, anybody could stand up at town meeting and say, no, take that entire line item out of the budget, and it could get passed that way, right? So the residents of the town could initiate this at town meeting without our recommendation, right? So
they can
always do that.
I'm new to this
Yeah.
game.
Oh, you're right,
They can only
you're right, you can't take
recommend-
it, you're right, you can't take out a line out of it.
They can say,
only
recommend,
recommend.
They can
but
say,
they can't tell you to do
well,
that.
right, yeah, sorry, you're
New to
right. I
this,
gotta
but
back
that's
off,
the
right?
one
So
thing I caught.
they could vote to remove the exact amount that
It wouldn't
comes
matter.
over.
It wouldn't matter because you'd say, yes, thank you, we'll take that money out of, you can vote to take
take
that
it
money
out
out of the budget, but it's not necessarily gonna come out of the
Yeah,
budget.
I understand that.
The other
But-
thing, if I could say, is that since we're starting up with either party can terminate, then maybe that gets around the issue of the differential in the voting dates. Because if the select board says we want to terminate this, even if the trustees don't want to, and we vote later, it wouldn't matter. If you vote to terminate it, then it votes terminate, and it's terminated.
According to this language.
Then what happens?
What if we chose to terminate it after they've approved it, and it's a short term?
Man,
That's what
I'm trying to
saying.
think of what,
Can
under
I
the
ask you a
circumstance. Okay.
So there was no termination language in the original
No.
agreement. And we trustees had a conversation the other night that we would fully expect the status quo to continue. So do we need termination language in this agreement? Since this is not implementing anything, it is studying and making recommendations on plan forward.
Yeah. I hear you. That's why so we're talking about this, and I'm trying to think of the actual circumstance under which we would terminate this, and it would have to come in a sort of a catastrophic, a lot of other things would be going on besides that, so.
I just think we do need that language in there, just like you're saying, that, it could be a catastrophic, but I think like we were saying the other night, we don't know the 5 members that are gonna be on the board, or the 10 members, 9 members, whatever, what have you, they're gonna be on the boards, and whatever, and how long this goes on for, If we just, who knows?
It's not a bad idea to have a termination.
I'm just
Right.
throwing
Hopefully we
out
never do it, but
another
it's-
option.
It's not a bad idea.
It doesn't hurt to have it in there, I think there's more
I
to
would-
it by not having it there.
I think one of the things I would suggest is we can, if the boards are of mind that you're amenable to the language as presented so far, adding October 1st in, and I think the attorneys need to address the next step of the process, which is town and village vote. I'm writing myself a note so I don't. To address language for town and village vote on budget. And then we can make the approval subject to final form of the attorneys.
Just, I mean.
Just for that language.
The language alone, I see it is no different than you're getting married and you ask for a prenuptial agreement. It doesn't affect, some people look at it and say, well, then you're expecting a divorce, you're doing, planning for that. You don't plan for it, you're protecting yourself against that just in case it does happen. So I think having any added language in this just protects us if say 5 years from now, a whole different group of people, or 20 years, or however long it goes on, you know?
Can I just, let me just throw an idea out to get maybe simplify and get around this. When we did this back years ago with an agreement between the trustees and the prudential committee, we had an evergreen. And it's like, this contract is self-renewing unless at a certain date, every year, you say, we don't want to renew this. So it would be, this contract just keeps going for 5 years unless by October 1st, either party steps up and says, we don't want to do this anymore, and then that gives everybody notice. And if either party doesn't do it by, or one or both doesn't do it by, then we're locked into it for another year until the following October.
But we still have to go through what the process is for the voters,
Yeah, you have to go through the process.
Yeah. which we definitely need to add in.
Well, and it says, or until the date that full, it's in term, or until the date that full consolidation of the public works occurs whenever occurs early, or whichever occurs earlier. So, so in term, after 23, or until the date occurs, whichever occurs earlier. George, you're asking that it then say it continues unless stated by October 1st.
Right.
Is that, but earlier you were talking, when Andrew was talking about the whole thing of picking a date that would be advantageous toward the vote, is October 1st the date, the date? I mean, I'm just curious if another date would be a better date to set the decision by, you know, just to work it through the process, so it doesn't linger beyond a fiscal year or into another.
Yeah, I got you. I don't know.
I say we let the lawyers figure it out
Yep.
and then come back to us.
Okay.
And maybe for the boards and for the people at home. Yes, the original agreement is stated to end July 1, 2018. You two are the parties to that agreement. I sort of treat right now, July 1 as New Year's Day. Nothing changes.
Right.
It's just a different year. You're both in agreement that you want the agreement to continue to go. You're both in agreement that you're working on the new language. Therefore, give it, so whether it gets approved on July 1 or whatever the date of your next joint meeting, nothing changes in what we're doing.
Yeah.
Agreed?
Yeah.
Thank you. And with that is the last lines, which I don't believe, I'll have to relook at it. I will.
I don't think there are any more changes after that one.
That's
After
it.
5, termination, I don't think there's any more changes,
That's it.
at least not tracked.
Now, I believe, did Ms. Subject have comments after this?
You know, I was thinking about the length of the term of the agreement, but if we put that evergreen language in there, then that addresses my concern, so I'm okay with that.
And where would that evergreen language go?
I'm thinking in term, the section of term.
maybe that would be the best way to do it.
Okay.
Assuming that in the interim between July 1, 2018 and 2023, should either board wish to make changes, it can be brought up and discussed.
And I believe there's,
Yeah, yeah.
in any agreement, there's two sides, and I believe both boards have at least acknowledged that through this joint process, that you can bring up anything that's related to your task, which is merger and becoming one community. I think the other side would be remiss if it didn't give you the opportunity to address an issue, any issue, in anything that you're doing together, whether it's in this agreement, in a department, in a policy, in a procedure. You'd be remiss to not want to have a discussion.
The clarifying question. So with the evergreen clause, is this to fully replace the 5-year term so that it wouldn't end 2023?
I don't know, that's a good question, I'm just thinking that, you just, want- we could just keep studying this forever, for decades, and just go into the next century if you wanted to. I'm just
I
kidding.
prefer not.
Yeah, I know, but it's a good point, you could say either 5 years or it's just self-renewing if you think that maybe it might take a little longer, but you're also looking at maybe there'll be no need to continue after 3 years. So we
Well,
don't know.
I think, here's the thing, I think in 5 years, we can complete this work.
Yeah.
The studies and the proposals. After that, I don't think there's any more work on a staff
No.
part. It's a political decision and a voter decision, not, I mean, we'll have this work done by 5 years, I would hope.
So keep that 5-year piece in here?
Yeah. But if we do need a little more time, we need to get a little more time.
And does that, putting the evergreen clause in
Then it would cover
term,
termination.
would that remove the termination section then? Would we remove the termination section?
No, I think I think you should cross that bridge 5 years from now and decide if you still need that clause or not. I think after 5 years, the agreement could sunset, it could live on just because a decision hasn't been made, but the reports and the studies will be in your hands.
Okay, so termination would, sorry. Yeah.
So the reason why I brought it up is because the evergreen clause that we had with the Prudential Committee is that this just continued in perpetuity.
Mhm.
This is a 5-year agreement.
Right.
So there is no annual renewal, there's no need for us annually to come back together and approve this, so is the evergreen even necessary if we just
I
modify
meant
the
in the
contract?
in the sense of saying that if we don't make our wishes known by October 1st, then it continues for one more year. That was the sense I meant it in. It just goes year to year, and the only time either party gets to say, we want to terminate this, is October 1st. And so logically speaking, you'd want to have 90, you'd probably want to give, if one party was intending to, you'd want to 90 days before October 1st, begin to make your wishes known, so that by October 1st, we say, okay, we're choosing this date to not continue this. But it was just a thought, it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah, I get
But
what
then
you're
it
saying.
takes all the rest of the angst about, the annual meetings and the voters out of it.
Right.
They would have to figure it out at that point, but we would be locked into the agreement for another year.
And we certainly can take this to the attorneys and discuss how to best word the term the term clause, year to year, 90-day notice before October 1st, or leave in the 5 specific years and figure out the language. I now know your intent.
Okay.
So we would need to go back to the attorneys to get
Mhm.
reworked, meaning we can't really approve it
Right.
tonight.
Yeah.
But it terminates before our next joint meeting.
And again-
So do we need to approve an
I think what you
extension?
should prove is subject to, that your agreement stays valid until such time as the new amendment takes effect.
Yeah.
And I think you could just do that by voice vote.
I think we are all in agreement that we want to at least, at a minimum, continue the existing agreement that we all signed. We want to continue that. No, it's not anyone's intention to stop that, so.
Until this gets.
Until the new one, and the new one basically just continues that.
Okay.
And Evan is right, the only aggrieved parties in this who are upset that the contract wouldn't be signed by July 1st is us. So if we're not aggrieved, then it's not a problem.
No one's agreed, are they? Everybody okay with what we talked about?
Yes.
All right.
I heard some conversation about the town vote versus the village vote, and I wondered if you could say in that fifth termination clause, when you talk about the town and village voting on this, if you could say town-wide, since there's a lot of confusion as to what town means in each context, and that way we're crystal clear that there would be a town-wide vote that the village residents would be invited to, as well as a village vote, which outside the village folks wouldn't be voting in.
Where in there, Irene, specifically?
You had written in, read us an addition about town and village
Right,
votes at one point, and
I
I just
put
wanted to
down
say
and
town-wide.
address town and village annual meeting, a vote.
I think
Okay,
Irene's
that works.
saying, if you okay with that, or do you want town?
As long as we're talking about the annual meeting.
I said
I
annual
just heard-
meeting.
Okay.
I just heard town and village votes, which, again, that's open
Annual
to
meeting, yes.
interpretation.
I put annual meeting.
Perfect.
Address town and village annual meeting vote.
Great, that works.
Okay. So, if there's no further discussion on the
So,
board side?
I'm guessing, so here's the plan. The idea would be to get this to the attorneys, tomorrow, Monday, latest, have them take a crack at it, hopefully get something back within, say, a week, and then redistribute it, well in advance of the next meeting versus at the table at the next meeting. Because I think the next one's like third week of July.
Well, we have it on June 26th. We still have one more June meeting.
No, I'm
so-
talking about a joint.
A joint
meeting.
Oh, joint meeting, oh.
So this will be ready for your next joint meeting.
Great.
It will not go back to the individual boards, just back to the joint board.
Sounds good. And do we need to do a vote to sort of signal our agreement to continue to maintain the current agreement in place until the new agreement is signed, to extend the deadline?
Can't hurt.
It cannot hurt.
Okay, I'll make a.
But before we do, sure, I'd like to just open it up to the public to see.
Oh, yeah, sure, yeah.
Is there anyone in the audience that would like to comment on that before we put a motion on the table? If you could stand up and state your name, first.
Yeah, Bruce Post,
Thank you.
town of Essex outside Underhill. The issue came up about somebody making a motion that's approved at town meeting, either to add something or reduce a line item in the budget. And I've heard that, oh, you can't do that, it's only advisory to the board. When I was on the board, I asked Jim, whatever his name was, I forget his last name, who was the consul for VLCT, he said, no, there's nothing in statute that says that. And then VLCT changed its policy. So what is the statute, is there a statutory prohibition against this? If so, what is it? Or is it an unwritten policy of the board or a tradition that says you can't do this?
My understanding, Bruce, is that since at town meeting, you're approving one number, the voters are approving a number, the budget, the final budget, that they could either add or subtract from that one number, but they are very able to tell us what changes they'd like to see. But they're really only talking about the total number, but you're talking about a line item. And it would be at our peril to not take your input into serious consideration, but it's only that number that you can change.
That's the traditional answer. What I'm saying is it statutorily prohibited, or is this a policy decision made by the board? It's not written down anywhere, it's just a tradition, it's a rationale. I want to know, what is the specific statutory provision that says this? And when I say statute, I not only mean general state statute, but the charter, because that's a statutory provision as well. So where is it? Where is it specifically that says
I don't know if
you
we can
can't
answer
do
that.
this?
Yeah, we can't answer that tonight, but we could probably look it up.
Well, could somebody get me an answer on this, please? And nothing against that, Max,
Yeah.
but that, you're doing what we've done for years. And I'll send you a copy of the memo I got from this guy from VLCT, and then they changed their policy, and VLCT is a lobbying group, and they're not the final word either.
I can only tell you the new person's perspective, and what I've been told by the town attorney is, and I believe it was Steve Eustace as the moderator.
Yes.
Is exactly what we've said. You can propose a change to the budget, but not specific. They ask for a specific line so that everyone knows what you're talking about, but you only ask for money to be added or subtracted, and it is the town board, select board, or the village board who then, has to administer it. And as they have stated, they know the public's wishes. So I will find out whether the state law does, but either way, you would be very much on thin ice with your public if at town vote, they went one way and you didn't do
Well,
it.
I understand.
Yeah, and you served.
I
so you
just
know.
want to know if there's a statutory provision.
Okay.
Because then we can have a debate. If there's not a statutory provision, where can people debate that this is a policy, it's a practice, it's not written down anywhere, it's just what we hear every year at annual meeting. And there may be no justification for it statutorily. And that's what I think is important. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Bruce. Anybody else like to comment tonight? Hello.
Betsy Dunn from Essex. The question I have is around the reports and the research that you have, and you're setting up this MOU right now. Do all of the people in town and all the people in the village know what the terms are for this?
In terms
of the MOU for the public works. Do we all understand where the money's coming from and who has governance over the public works? I don't think so, because nobody on my block does. And so I'm just concerned that you 9 plus 1 kind of thing, it's one of your people here said. Do people understand what this decision is about? And you're going to wait until December to let people know that they can have a conversation about where your minds are already made up about the budget, and do we really have input? Or is it, not really input?
Betsy, could you, I'm not really clear, you think that there's something different, you mean in terms of the actual contract between the village and the town? Or
Yes.
where the funding is coming from for the public works departments?
I want to know, do people know what the terms of this MOU are? And shouldn't we have a vote on whether we agree, not just the 5 from Essex Town and the 5 from the village, just making the decision? This is an impact on everybody. And I don't think people understand what it is you're crafting. Because I think a simple merger, not simply done, but a simple merger is a lot cleaner than doing all these MOUs.
Yes, I would agree with that, but we're not there yet, and we're on a path to hopefully get there. But we've been on this public works consolidation for a number of years now, and it's discussed at town meeting for those that attended, and we walked through it, what's in there as far as the consolidation between the village and the town.
Right.
So I certainly hope that means that they're making an informed decision when they vote. So I would say, at least for the people that attend, that yes, they understand.
So the
Because they're
people
both-
that attend is the real issue then, isn't it? Because
Well,
at town,
we need to keep it
Just 2
germane,
seconds.
Betsy, and that's one of the
Yes,
things we're going
okay.
to talk about.
Okay, but 2 seconds, because as you say, it's at town meeting that it gets discussed. Okay, but you already have your budget, and as you told Bruce, that, we could take down that line item and you could still fund the line item, is what you're saying to me. So the question is that there should be prior information about this before that, because not a good representation of the 20,000, 19,000 people in Essex are at town meeting who are voting on this. And I think that you need to be careful about doing all these MOUs, adding up to what? If it's taking you 3 years, 2 years, 4 years to do this one MOU, just do a merger in this year.
Thank you, Betsy. I think I saw,
Go ahead, Elaine.
Elaine?
Betsy, in terms of the MOU for Public Works that we're working on right now, because it was a budgetary issue for both the village and the town, our budget process is open to the public at all times, and we have to have public hearings before the budget gets to annual meetings. So there are, for every year, regardless of what we're talking about, there are multiple meetings where the public can come and hear what we're doing and talk about it. And in this particular case, because it was something unusual that we were doing, we wanted to educate the public as much as possible. And both boards took the opportunity to do public outreach. And you might remember that some select board members showed up at basketball games with a table and a handout with the information. I mean, there was a lot of public outreach, and there was a lot of discussion of it in the Essex Reporter. But that was extra outreach because it was an unusual thing we were doing. But every single budget process has multiple hearings and multiple opportunities for the public. So yes, we have a public participation issue in that it's very, very low, for lower than most towns in the entire state. But, you know, we're addressing it within all the legal means that we have.
Laura, did you have something?
Nope, Elaine summed it up well.
Okay. Anyone else like to address? Okay, I saw Paula, and then I'll come to you, Paul.
Paul.
I'm going to call on Paula. She had her hand up first, and then I'll come to you, Paul. Paul, sorry.
No, I just have a
Confusing.
question.
Okay.
Whether or not this is something that is an aspect of what Evan said, that there was to be a new communication person when Patty retires, who's going to be trying to put this stuff out there in a better way for people to get at it.
Yeah.
Because it sounds to me like that's an appropriate place for putting the contract and this information.
Yeah, that's true. Thank you. Paul?
Yeah, Paul Austin from Essex. What puzzles me was, we all know why a lot of people don't come. I mean, we're talking a population of 20,000. We can accommodate a fifth of those. I would think the interest of the board would be to try to get the support of the community, not to squeak it through, or gee, you should have come to the meeting on July 12th at 7 o'clock. You might have heard that particular issue. I do think that it is somewhat incumbent on the board, and it's not going to be easy, to figure out how to get the highlights of this proposal sufficiently disseminated so people do understand what they're doing. I think the problem is going to be is that when it comes to a vote, there's going to be a significant number that just doesn't know, and it's going to get voted against it. So I would suggest that you work at trying to figure out how can we consolidate the language, the verbiage, get it out to the community, and then hope for the best.
Thanks, Paul.
So I'm gonna try and do that right now for everyone that's here and is watching. So the amendment the extension of the MOU that we're working on is changing nothing that we have in place today. We are simply saying that the next step is that we want the village manager, the unified manager, and staff to look at the recommendations from the committee that was charged with further consolidation and come up with a plan. We have specifically stricken from this language the ability for the unified manager to implement the plan unilaterally. So it is simply to say we're keeping everything as is that we've had for 5 years.
Well, we've been doing public works for 3 years.
For 3 years, and saying, come back with a plan to do the rest of it. And then, you know, obviously we will do our best to get out to the communities to say, we may or may not approve this, come give your feedback. But I'm probably gonna say something that's not gonna be well liked, but everyone is a citizen of this community, and they have an obligation to find out the information as well. We're doing the best we can. But just to be clear, this is changing nothing that's in place today.
Jerry?
I would like to add to
Jerry
what Elaine
Fox.
said. My name is Jerry Fox, I live in the town. I'd like to add to what Elaine said. There was a significant discussion about this in both the village and the town reports. So if you really wanted to know, it was there. It's been there every year for the last 3 years as they've tried to go through this step by step.
Thank you, Jerry. Kevin?
One quick thing, we throw around acronyms. For the people at home, MOU
Yes.
stands for Memorandum of Understanding. So when you hear MOU, I apologize, it means Memorandum of Understanding. It's a legal term that both, they understand what they're signing. Lori's comments are true. When and if the staff comes through with these plans, they will be brought forth at public meetings, such as these joint meetings. They will also, if to be implemented, will have financial ramifications in both budgets. Those have to be addressed, and maybe to Mrs. Dunn's comment, those are the types of things we're gonna have to separate out into like sheets of what is the actual financial impact to the village, to the town, and what do they mean. That's why all of this work has to be done in studies and reports and brought back to the boards for action. It's policy, it's the community, not just the unified manager saying this is what we're gonna do. So I applaud the conversation and the attempt for clarification. But it'll have to be done well in advance of the town meeting, but it will be in the document as well, Jerry, thank you for that comment. It will be in the documents, and we will have to do some public outreach as well.
Is there anyone in the audience who hasn't had a chance to speak yet that would like to? Okay, thank you again for your comments. So I'm going to bring it back to the board. We were going to look for a motion then to,
Yeah, I will make a motion that the trustees signal their agreement to continue the original Public Works Consolidation Agreement until the new amendment is signed later in July.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Does that motion make sense to everybody?
Yep.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
okay, what's the select board's pleasure?
I would move the same as George on behalf of the select board.
Thank you, Irene. Well said. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Andy. Any further discussion on that?
Just one
And-
question.
yes.
Sorry, George.
That's okay.
The statement was made later in July. What if we don't come to agreement in July? Do we want to give it a later date? Like September 1 or something like that, so that we have a couple of meetings before we.
You can reverse it
But-
if it takes too long.
True. Or, as I suggested, we could bring this up at the July meeting. If we're not ready, then we can.
I thought it was
So
just gonna propose
I
Okay.
will accept the motion as proposed since I seconded it too. so.
Okay. All right, any further discussion on approving that motion? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. 4-0.
Sorry.
Did you vote for this?
I did.
It's just happened, right?
It just hung out.
Let the record reflect, and Lori's good with it too.
Okay, all right. Next.
Okay, looking forward to that new amendment. And so now we are on to, last time, we had a homework assignment to come up with lots of definitions for commonly used words around governance and consolidation. And we consolidated the definitions. We consolidated the words about consolidation. And Elaine and Irene were the stars of that show. And so I'm going to turn it over to
The trustees' definite impressions of the words, the select board's impressions, and the staff. There was also a document of staff's definitions. And we reviewed all of them together, and these definitions here are an amalgam of those. And in many cases, we reviewed all of the definitions and said, that one, by this, this particular one is perfect, let's use that. Most of the cases, it's an amalgam of multiple people's definitions. And we didn't want to get super prescriptive, we just wanted to find appropriate definitions for the terms as they relate to this conversation of consolidation. So that's it. I mean, that's what we did. If you have any questions or want to know how we arrived at particular ones, we can try to explain that. One or two of them required, 3 of them, 4 of them required multiple, sometimes a word has more than one meaning. So 4 words in this list have more than one meaning as related.
I just want to say one thing. Thank you.
Yeah,
Because
thanks.
being on this committee would have been way too much for me. Just imagine you two talking about each individual word. Thank you.
I think we all want to say
It takes a special personality to do this kind of work.
And I don't mean to be critical, but they got the job done.
Right? See?
Unlike some
Here.
other subcommittees.
Just saying.
Hey.
I would like to mention one definition in particular.
Mr. President.
The one definition in particular, town. It's super obvious. It's, as we have the entirety of Essex, including the village, and all 21,000 plus residents. But under that, we wanted to emphasize, all of us at the table need to be very specific when we're using the word town. Make sure that when you're talking about whatever it is you're talking about, whether it's staff or town outside the village or whatever, town-wide, you take a second to use the right verbiage so that we minimize confusion.
Which is what Irene did just moments ago.
Just a few minutes ago, Irene did that, so, yeah. So we can't redefine the word town, it is what it is, so we need to be more careful with the way we use it.
Elaine and Irene, maybe you can,
I'll get you next time.
why did I ask you to do this exercise? Maybe give a little bit
Sure.
to not only the people in this room, but the people at home. Why is it so important to do these words? And
Yeah. In any big undertaking where you're going to have, reorganization or creation of something new, and there's multiple participants from different perspectives, it's really a good idea to identify any potential pitfalls in terms of defining things, because you don't want to get deep into a conversation and realize that this person's talking about one thing, this person's talking about something completely different, but they're both using the same word. So any big process like this should have a common language. And so these were the words that the trustees, the select board, and the staff identified as the most important vocabulary of this conversation of consolidation. So having common language is really important to minimize disagreement.
Okay, and I saw Andy had his hand up. Andy? There he
Yep.
is.
The consolidation, definition for consolidation contains the phrase, as well as maintaining or improving the quality of service delivery. I always get nervous when I see that because it's frequently interpreted to mean no lessening of services. I mean, I think that when we're looking at consolidation, we also need to consider what we're going to stop doing. But this definition doesn't allow for that. If you interpret this to say we have to have the same level of services, because it says quality of services, which means they have to be really good services, but if you do fewer of them, you can still do quality, sorry, he's trying to interrupt me.
No,
Stop. Please.
Yeah,
sorry.
Yep, we're going to have it when you're done.
So,
My apologies.
you can still have quality services, you can still maintain quality services, but do fewer of them. But the way this is frequently interpreted, the way I've seen it done before, when I was involved with the rec governance discussion, it always came up that we can't take anything away from anybody. But I really, really think that we're doing ourselves a disservice. We don't also look at things that we want to stop doing or that don't make sense to do in the context of a consolidation.
I defer.
Okay.
Thank you for pointing that out. I would two answers to that. One is, I would interpret the word maintaining, when we say maintaining or improving the quality of service delivery, maintaining a quality of service delivery does not prescribe how we maintain it. We could still maintain it, but lower the physical work that's done or lower the budget for it, as long as the quality is as perceived as good. The other answer I would have to that is, when you're thinking about that phrase, that you would have to look at the definition above it, appropriate level of services, which is a separate definition, but is related and is up to the community about, you know, what they expect, what they need, what they want, and what they're willing to pay for.
Just was gonna say that the whole concept of it's very ambiguous, it's very subjective, and for us to quantify what's quality services, and, you know, everyone's gonna have their own opinion. Obviously, you know, that's the way it is. As we see with the vote, with, you know, whatever, whether it's rec or what have you, but services in a community of our size, the quality of services, it depends on where you live too. As I brought up before, you live in a village, you expect different services when you live in a more densely populated municipal, you know, area, urban area per se, as compared to somebody who's living in a more rural district of the community. So to cast a broad, you know, statement like that, it just, I have a tough time with that whole thing. You know, hear what I'm saying? Or
You
no?
have a-
You don't? You think everybody has the same expectations, Andy? That everyone in our community as a whole, the town a whole, has the same expectation of services as, you know, everyone else, whether you live here in the village or whether you live in the far reaches of the hinterlands of the town?
To understand what you're saying, though, could you tell us what changes? you
Well,
propose?
I guess I wouldn't get so hung up on that. I guess I'd say, you know, maybe change the verbiage to some, and I can't think of a good way to put it, but it's a very difficult thing to quantify, you know, to explain.
Okay. Evan, and I think
Thank you.
Andrew. Sorry.
When the staff was discussing consolidation and the process of, let's say, alignment, we took some of all the comments of the boards and said, look, why would we be doing this? Okay? Why are we doing this? If it's not to maintain the levels of service and of the things of the town and the village residents, why do it? So we wanted to be specific that the practice and the process of consolidation was not about changing service levels as part of our discussion. It's how to put the organizations together. It is then, once they're together, and even during, for the boards to come and ask staff, look, money's different, this is, would you do it differently? But the process of consolidation isn't about specific maintenance of levels. We just assume the maintenance of level until such time as there's monetary change or board change as to direction. But consolidation is more about putting it together, how does it look, how does it act, and not changing policy to what we do and how we do it, as long as the service levels of that day are met by both communities. That's how we viewed it, and that's probably why the language is such. I think that ultimately, over the next 5 or 10 years, you will probably go through many of the different policies and service levels and have conversations and give direction to staff. That's kind of how I look at it. Whether we're together or separate, you should always look at things. How are we doing sidewalks? When do we do sidewalks? Whose sidewalks do we do? Has nothing really to do with the act that we're doing now. It's based on board direction and monetary.
Andrew?
I would just say that with the definition, I like the definition, it makes a whole bunch of sense in my mind. With what you're saying, Andy, I wouldn't see this as saying we can't look at consolidation in a way that would then possibly reduce the quality of services. Maybe there's one less sidewalk in every street, who knows? But that for our understanding, when we talk about consolidation, here's what we mean, and if we mean something different with whatever the phrase or whatever the word may be, we all just need to be aware of what we're trying to say. Similar to what I read with town, if what we're trying to say is consolidating something, 2 departments, and it is a possible service reduction, then we just need to be vocal about that, make sure we're really elaborating what we mean.
Andy?
Just, it's been my experience, as I said, when I was the alternate in the rec study committee, that phrase was in there, and it was frequently referred to as, we can't stop doing anything that we're currently doing today. And I do not agree that we should have that phrase in there, that we need to, just because we've always done it, we need to continue doing every service that we provide today. It's just my position.
Could you offer a change in language then for that definition? To-
I would
to
strike
satisfy
that, I would strike that phrase completely, as well as maintaining or improving quality of service delivery. We address level of services in the prior definition.
Okay.
Can I say something?
Mark?
So, I completely understand what Andy's saying, but to me, maintaining or improving the quality of service delivery is a very, I don't think it gets to a specific service that we would not be able to stop or change if we needed to. And I think we need to, I think we need to have something about service to maintaining quality in here. And so maybe we reference appropriate level of services in the consolidation.
Would that satisfy?
What, can I propose an alternate? And their
Okay.
option would be just to say, as well as maintaining quality,
Of what?
Yeah.
period, of performance, of service, levels of service, of the roads, of, quality is an important aspect of this. And one of the reasons why we're doing this is to maintain quality.
Right, but I think if you don't say quality of what,
Okay.
I think you're getting, I think what we're hearing are two different perspectives. You wrote it from the perspective of the citizen.
Yes.
What's the quality of life that the citizen sees?
Right.
And you're seeing it from the perspective of the provider. You mean we're gonna have to keep doing everything exactly the same way we're doing it? And I think and I think what Elaine's going for is what's the quality of life that the average citizen sees? We don't want to consolidate, but have that deteriorate. Have the roads aren't being plowed as often, or rec programs aren't as accessible or available anymore. And it doesn't really, and I think what the way this is written, it's to say, the intent here is that, yeah, we may change a lot of things, we may change structures and how things are done, but overall, we're going to maintain generally the level of quality that the average citizen sees. You're saying, but I get totally what you're saying. You're saying we have to keep doing everything exactly the way, we're going to consolidate everything, but also keep doing everything exactly the way we're doing. I get that. So maybe it really needs to be from the perspective of, maybe that needs to be put in there from the quality of life for citizens. And how we achieve that or maintain that is up to us to figure out.
But it talks about goal of efficiency, and I think that's kind of what you're talking about, isn't it?
I think that the definition that right above it, it says appropriate levels of services covers that question, and it doesn't need to be repeated in the consolidation thing, because as again, I'll say it for the third time, that when I was in the rec thing and I remember suggested that something be stopped, I was always shut down because of that phrase, that exact phrase that was in the rec governance goals or whatever. And so there was no discussion about stopping anything, and that's why I understand all the words. All those words can be. That's why we're doing this, right? Because there's words.
Yeah.
And I'm fine with leaving the definition as the way it is. But as soon as somebody tells me we can't stop doing that because we've been doing it, I'm going to say, oh, remember that discussion I had back on July 12th? Because this will come up.
Well, how about
Absolutely.
including the elimination of duplicate services or unnecessary services, putting a phrase in there.
Efficiency and cost effectiveness.
I think there's already a definition of appropriate level of services. It says
and
it right there.
I agree with you, Andy, but I think that needs to be referenced in consolidation. Because if someone isn't looking at this document in its entirety, they're not going to know what that means.
So if the phrase says as well as an appropriate level of services, instead
Okay.
of saying maintaining and improving quality.
So is the recommendation for it to say combining of two or more departments, committees or service areas with a goal of efficiency and cost effectiveness, as well as appropriate levels of services.
As well as maintaining appropriate
Yeah, I
levels
think
of
maintaining.
services.
Pardon?
You wanna
As
say-
well
As well as maintaining an appropriate level of service.
Appropriate levels of services, comma, so that the resulting entity operates
Yes.
under a
Yes.
single point of authority.
Yes,
Everybody good with that?
Yes.
Sure.
thank you.
Okay, good. All right, good
Uh,
discussion.
You got that? Got it. Thanks, because I was speaking.
Any other comments on the words, on the definitions? Andy?
Governance, the definition that's here says the persons who make up a body for the purpose of administering, set policy, and exercise authority on behalf of the electorate. Doesn't the structure of said persons also, isn't that also part of governance? Because it's not just the people, I mean, if.
Yes. It's the act of governing.
I
We
think.
had a lot of definitions for this word, and we streamlined it to this definition because there were so many different ways to interpret it. The persons who make up a body, so the body is in there. Governance can also be considered the policies that the body enacts. It can be considered the hierarchy, which goes voters, select board, staff. I mean, we had like 5 or 6 different definitions for that. And we didn't want to use all 5 or 6 of them. So, I mean, it's the board's pleasure, but, yeah.
Andrew?
This was actually the one I had a note, that usually I don't comment on this kinds of thing, because as I mentioned to Lori, this isn't my strength. Governance seems like the one where, in my mind, there would need to be multiple, because of exactly what you said. It means so many different things at so many different times. I can't see it as being one definition.
We can bring back an earlier version, and instead of wordsmithing it here for a lengthier definition, we can bring back another version.
Can I make an attempt at a concise one?
Sure, certainly.
Governance, the act of governing to establish, implement, and monitor policies by members of a governing body who exercise authority on behalf of the electorate. Is that captured?
Could you say that again, please?
The governance is the act of governing to establish, implement, and monitor policies by members of a governing body who exercise authority on behalf of the electorate.
That doesn't answer my initial comment that the structure of that body is also, I think, an important factor in governance.
You mean like number of members or the council
Number of
manager?
members,
or-
the representation that they, it's the structure of the government isn't.
That's going into a separate issue then. Your governance is the broader aspect, definition of the whole. You're going down to a sub structure of governance. Governance is broader than just the board itself. And I think you're looking into the smaller, I just look at governance as a broad term covering, as Max defined it, whatever. It could be defined as country's governance, for the country, for the smallest town. But then when you talk about the board makeup and the structure and how that works, that's getting outside of that terminology, in my opinion.
Well, we have a representation definition too.
So I just think that it's going outside of that. I think that governance, as Max defined it, sounds great.
I struggle using the word to define the word.
We tried to
So
avoid
using
that.
govern as a definition of governance, I struggle with.
I'm trying to find the definition, I'm trying to find the packet where everybody's definitions were, because I had like a 4-part definition for governance. And, you know what, we can
Should we ask the subcommittee if they're so willing to maybe work on this one? We may have some other ones, rather than try to wordsmith it here, and we'll be here kind of all night if we do that. That's why we want the subcommittees to do it, and then come back and review. So
Yeah,
the
we're
process
happy
is
to do
working
that.
well, but I think maybe we should move on and say, we're stuck here, and ask you if you could continue.
Andy?
Andy?
Can I move on to another word?
Sure.
Tax equity, I think we need a statement in there that says that services are equally available. If everybody's paying for them, everybody else has to have access to them.
That seems fair, absolutely.
So could you propose something?
I'm proposing some reference to access to services. But I think also, I mean, if I'm paying for a service, if I'm not allowed to have access to it, I don't think that's tax equity.
Well, you could have all property owners pay their fair share of property taxes to support the town of Essex's, inclusive of the village of Essex Junction municipal services, and have access to all those services, comma, regardless of where they are, where they live in the Essex community and so forth. Just the word phrase, and have access
Just
to
need
those
to have
services.
some
Everybody go with that?
clause in there that
Okay.
That's a good,
grants equal access.
good thing to add,
Great,
definitely.
you got that one?
Mel, can you send it?
We'll come to you after, we're gonna have the board discuss it first, it's kind of our practice, Paul, okay? Yes.
Where did you want exactly that?
It'd be comma, after municipal services, comma, and have access to those services, comma.
Regardless of where they live.
Yes.
Okay.
Can I do my next one?
Thanks.
Well, everybody okay with that then, as is? All right, sure, next.
Okay, transparency, it says the ability for people, groups, and organizations outside the government to obtain complete, accurate, and timely information about activities of the government. I think that we inside the government also need to have access to all of those things. So it's not just people outside looking in, we also within our own group need to understand, need to be able to see everything that's going on.
So just scratch that phrase outside of the government, that might be sufficient.
Yes. Yes.
So but you're the government, but you're saying you don't have access to yourself.
I did not
I
say,
didn't
I did not
mean
say
that
I
to
don't
vote
have
something,
access
but
to
I'm just
myself. I just want to make sure that I'm not, there's no barriers to my access
To documents.
things that are being discussed among, I mean, this is a, this is an open meeting law kind of thing as well,
Okay.
We can't have side discussions and private conversations and all that, that's
Okay.
also part of
I didn't mean,
transparency.
that sounded sarcastic, I didn't mean that way. I just wasn't sure. No, Andy, I'm sorry, I just wasn't sure, but the document, what documents wouldn't you have access to?
I don't know. You don't know what you don't know until you find out you already know.
Just say he doesn't want accident to be allowed.
So that's
There's
the
a law that protects it.
That's
Could we then add basically on that to, at the end, say in accordance with freedom of information legislation? That covers everybody's right to get access.
But that's all,
With,
in accordance with that, yeah, with that, I guess,
That's
That's a
the
sore
I
spot
think,
right now.
yeah,
because you don't have access to everything,
No,
right,
you don't.
right.
right? So, but there's a law that defines what you do have access to, and I'd just like to say, add that to say.
Can we say according to law?
Yeah.
According to law.
Okay,
Yeah, that's
according to
good.
law. Okay. That'd be simple.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Everybody good with that? Everybody okay? All right. Any other words out there that you wanted to comment on from the board? Irene?
I just wanted to mention that as I was rereading the minutes of our last joint meeting, Mark Banks had suggested we add the word community, and I neglected to bring that up because it wasn't along the words. So I'd be glad to add that word. It's okay with people
Good.
when Elaine and I go back to.
Yep.
So we're going to do governance and community.
So should we just table this until those are done and then do it all at once? And do it all at once?
Bring it all back.
Do you want to do that?
Yep.
I think that's.
Make that suggestion instead of some torturous motion that does certain things and not others.
Okay, is the board done? I'd like to open it up to the public now. Okay, there are comments from the public. Before we go to you, Jerry, I saw your hand up, but I know Paul was chomping at the bit here. Go ahead, Paul.
It's just, I'm a little confused on tax equity. I think what I heard, and I may be wrong, and let me boil it down, is that today, if the village would like to purchase goods and services beyond what the town provides, then they can do so and they finance that with revenue they obtain from businesses within the village. Assuming that to be true, what I thought I heard, if you live in the town, you have access to all the services, be they in town or village. And I'm not sure that's fair to the village people. I think that if they wanted to charge additional fees, if you live outside the village, that's reasonable since they're paying. Now, I may be wrong in what I heard, but that's what I think I heard if I boil it down.
Yeah, I'll tell you, Paul, I understand what you are saying, and in the past, there have been some village politicians and folks who would like to try to do, charge people to go to the library, but it has been long-standing village policy that everybody in the town of Essex, and everybody in the town of Essex has access to village services. There's never been a denial. I think the only thing that where we've limited it, there are things, the Maple Street pool can only fit so many kids at once. And we get a lot more kids showing up than the pool can fit. So in some rec programs, they give a little bit of priority or they give a break in service to families within the village. But families outside the village in the town still have access to those programs, but they may have to pay a little bit more.
Well, that's what I mean, and I live outside the village, and I have no problem paying for services provided by the village. I think that's only fair. I think what the problem one might run into, and again, if I boil it down to the words I think I'm hearing, is that today, the tax rate would be the same in the village as it is outside the village if they bought no additional goods or services and so forth. But today, it's probably higher because they did and they have gone beyond what they had wished. So there's going to be two camps that are kind of butting heads. So again, my only point here, I see no problem being outside the village, paying for services the village has paid for me to use, because I think that's only fair. That's what I consider equity.
Yeah, I just like to just go, I think that you're not, I would just expand on what you're saying a little bit. For example, planning and community development in the village. We have our own planning and community development department in the village. We pay entirely for that in the village, but we also contribute to the town's planning and development office, which doesn't do any planning and development in the village. Same thing with the capital fund. The village has its own capital fund for repairing village roads and infrastructure, which we fund entirely within the village, but we also contribute to the town's capital fund. And I think it's those kinds of things when you hear village people talking about tax equity. That's the real guts that we're getting at. Is that we're pulling we're funding two different structural sorts of things that government must provide. So it's not just we're buying the library and the recreation department. We're also paying for some fundamental services as well.
Jerry?
Well, I now have two things to say. First thing I have to say is that I think that when this is all settled, this is wonderful just for the reporter to bring the community in and say, here's where we're talking. This is a thing, an entity that you can take credit for and say consolidation, and so we can all speak the same language, and you should get I think you should get this published when you're ready.
Okay. Thank you.
Another thing I have to say is, and I've said this before in this group, I live in the town. My future is the village. This is the whole town of Essex is becoming an urban area, will continue to be this. And so these guys are planning for your future because in 20 years, the people living here aren't going to want to be the town. They're going to want to be the village. And they're going to want, well, right now, most of the people who live in the town want all the services the village has. We want sewers, we want water piped to our house, we want gas, we want our library, services. The town is becoming an urban area that looks just like the village. We have little bigger lots, and that's about all.
Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you, Jerry.
Paula, did you have something?
Sorry?
I was saying thank you to you.
You're welcome.
And Paula, now, did you, I saw your hand up
Yeah,
before.
somewhere on this list, maybe at the end, you might want to put a phrase that these definitions are not inclusive. I can't think of the right word here. What I'm thinking is that a lot of these things, some of these things are definitions, some of them are descriptions, under which there can be many detailed definitions, especially consolidation, for instance, best management practices could be a whole list. So, this is legal. I mean, I'm just thinking in terms of an escape hatch. If somebody comes up and asks you why something else isn't under a certain word.
Okay,
That it isn't inclusive.
okay, that's a good point, thank you. Yes, Betsy.
So under the definitions consolidation, you also have, it says operates under a single point of authority. And have you defined who that single point of authority is?
Elaine, do you want to?
It's deliberately unspecific because, for example, it could be all of the village staff and town staff are reporting to a single unified manager. The public works staff in the village and the town are reporting to their individual managers, but at some point, they're going to report to one manager. At some point, it's possible that these two boards will be one board and it will be the one authority. So we wanted to make this as universal or general as possible so that it could apply to multiple situations.
Evan, did you want to comment on that?
And if I could, the idea of tax equity, it's a term. We use it liberally, and we should think, the definition is correct. I think it's aspirational
Yes.
in nature because there are laws about current tax equity, and the debt incurred by the village and the residents who voted for that debt stays the commitment of those property owners until such time as that debt is paid in full. So tax equity itself is a liberal construct until such time as that debt is paid in full by the people who voted for it.
Right.
That's the law. So while it says what you're trying to do, it's aspirational because it will take time for that to occur in full.
Really good point.
Understand that, and any debt incurred between now and a merger would stay with the entity that created it. The town does not have that because the town, if it incurs debt, which I believe it has not,
For the police facility.
except for the police facility, is paid for by
None of us are
all
without debt.
of the property owners of the town,
Right.
which includes the village.
Is there anyone else in the public who would like to comment, who has some comment before? Bruce?
Yep, hi. Bruce Post, same residence as before.
It
First
didn't
of all,
change in the last one?
well, I could also see the town of Essex outside Jericho. Andy, thank you for your points on consolidation. I think they were well-spoken, and you raised an excellent issue, so thanks for that. On some of these definitions, I think it would be helpful to elaborate with examples. For instance, on identity, I could read into that, but what do you mean specific? What's behind it? And representation, I don't even want to talk about that. Tax equity, again, I think needs explanation. Again, fair share, I really don't know what that necessarily means, but what's behind that, and there should be some commentary with the definition, I think it would be very helpful. On transparency, Andy, again, geez, Andy, you're on a roll tonight. You hope people inside can have access. And I know when I was on the board, I had trouble getting access sometimes. It was denied me. And I thought that was crazy. On the I think I'll stop. I think I've given, culture again. What does that mean? Give me some examples. Let people understand why you've arrived at that. I think that would help people understand where you came down on the representative discussion. And then on trust, what does it mean that the presumption that board members honor publicly made commitments? What does that mean? Again, some commentary might help me understand that better. What does that mean?
I think in general, I like what Paula asked earlier, which
Yeah, I had
was,
trouble hearing Paula, so.
well, Paula was suggesting that we put a disclaimer on here that says these definitions are not comprehensive. They are, there's multiple meanings in multiple contexts and sub-meanings. And the purpose of these definitions was to help these two boards communicate clearly to each other. And because we have had trouble in the past misinterpreting each other's words and using the same words for different meanings. So initially, the purpose of these definitions is to help us communicate more clearly. It will definitely be helpful if, as Jerry suggested, we publish those definitions for sure. But I would not say that they are the end-all and be-all of meaning for this conversation. And over time, as we become more conversant with them in the way we intend them, people will understand what we're saying. Specific examples, I believe, will arise as the conversations continue, depending upon which department we're talking about or which initiative we're undertaking. I think everything will become clear with time, but this is a tool for us right now to start conversations on the same footing.
Again, I think commentary might explain some of these things better with specific examples. I know when I was on the board, we had this impulse that all votes had to be 5-0. We had a proposal by one board member that you couldn't, if you dissented from a vote, you couldn't go home and tell your wife about your reasons why. We never adopted it, but that was part of the discussion. So I'd like to know what's behind this with some commentary, and then I'll maybe understand the definition better. And I wasn't, I try to be involved in this stuff, so I'm not coming at this. I know I'm not an expert, but as an informed citizen, some of these things, to me, are too amorphous. Thanks.
Thank you, Bruce. Anyone else who hasn't had a chance to speak yet on this topic? Okay, so we'll bring it back to the boards then. It sounds like a couple things to do. One is with tax equity, the other is community.
No, governance
Sorry,
and community.
And community.
That's it.
And perhaps if you wanted to consider any examples, there's some things if you think it would help. Okay. Good? Okay, thank you both again for stepping forward to do that.
Thank you.
Very much. Okay, Jim.
Okay, so we will move on to setting goals for evaluation of unified manager. And this was Andrew, Irene, Lori, and Mike. And I understand that because of time constraints and vacations and so forth and other conflicting schedules, this didn't completely get done. But I would like to say that there is some urgency to this because if we're going to give Evan goals, we have to give them to him in a time when he can actually achieve those goals. And I did notice that there was a wonderful list of goals, and I'm wondering if we could just pick some tonight. What do you think? Is that a possibility? But I'll just throw that out there as a possibility, and then I'll leave it up to Andrew and Irene and Elaine and Lori. Elaine, I'm sorry, I took your name in vain. You were not involved in this. But Andrew, Irene, and Lori, if you want to sort of lead us through this and any ideas, and maybe would it be possible for us to pick some out tonight?
I know I'm one of the big reasons why we haven't met yet, and that for work purposes.
You're not the only reason.
Well, I'll take it, I don't mind. For work purposes, my schedule really didn't allow for many daytime meetings.
Gotcha.
So as far as I'm concerned, I don't mind trying to go through and do it now. Also understanding we're at 8:42 in the evening and we still have more to go.
Okay. Yeah, I think you have a meeting.
We do have a meeting scheduled next week.
Okay, so do you want to
I
just?
say, let's just
wait? Okay,
do
good.
that.
Let's do
We
it.
put it to the
Is that good?
subcommittee.
Okay.
But that means we want to take option one, I think.
Yes.
Right? And postpone it. But if we're going to do that, I think I'd like to also then move the assessment from February to March, so move it a month so that Evan still has the same length of time for these goals, and we don't condense that runway for him.
Do we need to vote on that?
I think so.
You think so?
I would think we wanted to do,
Okay.
take
So
option,
we have to
option one, but I would propose that we not only set a deadline for establishing these, but also for,
The review.
for review. And
Quick-
maybe it would be after town meeting. Yeah, before we do a vote. Great?
Just a question on that. In terms of the contract, I can't remember when a pay raise is supposed to happen. Is it a higher date or is it fiscal year? And if it's higher date, then that's probably why the February date is in place.
Yes, that's right. I'd like to say, how about this as a way out? Let's not get into an extended debate about how we're going to extend it in the time. I would just like to say, if we could wrap this up at our next joint meeting, with the understanding that you just shaved another month off, so we got to get those easier. If you could do that, how about that? Is that a possibility?
Yes.
Take that into consideration.
Plus, I don't see Evan idling.
Yeah, he's not exactly, he's got
No.
stuff to do. So
Stop
So let's,
waiting for-
instead of voting
Do
to
I-
extend the deadline or anything like that, why don't we keep the deadline that's in there?
Do I get full credit for these meetings?
Absolutely.
You can have another month.
Okay, does that sound good?
Yes.
So we don't need a motion?
No, let's not do it, let's just,
But don't we need a motion to select option one?
I think we need a
Yeah.
motion to do option one that
Right.
extends it.
Yes.
Yeah. We just won't do what I was proposing
Right.
because the contract.
Yeah.
It would be project.
Option one, we'll see you next month.
Okay. So, but I think we need to vote on it.
Wasn't there a member of the public wanting to comment?
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you for reminding. Okay, before we put a motion on the table, I'd like to open it up once again to the public here. If there's any comments on the topic 5C that we're talking about, the goals for the municipal.
Yes.
Okay. I know, Paula, you reserved right to talk, so why don't we start with you?
Okay. Paula Michael, 17 Carmichael Street, I didn't say this before. I'm just glancing through here again. My first question, I guess, is I see a couple of things about having Evan set goals and Evan at the end having a goal about alignment. So, my question is, has Evan given a list of what he sees as his goals to the boards?
I would say.
yes, yes, the one big one was he has proposed doing a lot of the alignment of the existing practices of village and town departments and looking at things like personnel manuals for, personnel processes for the two different library and recreation departments and trying to sort them out and get them aligned. So he came up with he and Greg came up with a fairly substantial work prospectus
Okay,
for
he's
themselves.
already
Yeah.
had input into
Yep.
this whole.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay. I'm gonna raise something. Since I'm not inside the government, I don't know what happened when the unified manager was hired and what goals were. And implied that he would be expected to achieve other than a general one of consolidation. But what I'm going to address is something I see as critical economically, that may not have been one of the goals that he was given when he was hired. So I don't know whether this is fair or unfair, I just think it's critical. And I want to talk about affordability in a very specific way. The select board here knows, the trustees may not know, that for the last 3 years I've been trying to get on the agenda establishing an affordable housing trust fund in Essex. And I brought it up again at, in a general way in public to be heard at the last board meeting. I brought it up last year as a resolution at the town meeting, and a non-binding one. And it's in the report on, I believe, page 77. You can talk all you want about tax equity, tax incremental financing, attracting businesses. If the corporations, and they have said this already to the unified manager, cannot find people who will come here because they cannot afford to live here, who is going to be buying from the businesses that you're giving these tax breaks to? To me, it's whether you're going to have what end you're gonna have leading the horse, the back or the front. And I would like to make a couple of other points related to this. I had a conversation with Regina Mahoney at CCRPC yesterday, asking her what was gonna be the follow-up to the housing meeting they convened about 6 weeks ago, 2 months ago. Andy was there, and Unified Manager, and Robin Pierce and a couple of other people, from Essex. The hot topic as the night went on, and it was a 2-hour meeting, was affordable housing trust funds. And several municipalities, South Burlington was there, Shelburne and Heinsberg. Shelburne, the managers, has had people working on this for some time. His comment was that then you go to the planning commission and the boards, and there's no political will to do it. Heinsberg didn't know anything about it and was very interested and wants to find out more. So when I talked to Regina yesterday, I asked her if there was going to be a follow-up and what it would be, and if this might be it. And she said, yes, that was the biggest single topic that came back, is wanting follow-up. So the next meeting in September or October is going to be on affordable housing trust funds and how you set them up and how they operate. That's coming before the big housing meeting in November, which I think Laura Collins is involved in. And I'm aware that Mara came to the trustees meeting the other night and more or less demanded a housing commission.
I'm sorry, you
Something to
said
that
what?
effect.
You said what?
Mara came to the trustees meeting, is this correct, and talked about establishing a housing commission?
We asked her to come and talk about it.
Okay.
She didn't demand it, we asked her to come.
Okay. That was something I was told, so I wasn't there.
Thought I heard the word demanded. I don't believe
No.
anybody demanded
No.
anything.
So in any case, the affordable housing trust funds are basically set up to eventually help as they grow, the developers with their fees.
Is there a goal?
That's one thing they do.
Is there a goal in there? I'm sorry.
Well, one thing they do is help the developers with their fees upfront.
I think she's at, like, we want to, you're saying you want to have us incorporate a goal in Evan's
Yes,
review
I'm
of.
sorry, I'm trying not to run off. I feel like this may not have been a goal that was originally part of the Unified Managers contract, so to some extent this is unfair to ask him to do this now, but when you're looking at the economic picture here, if you leave this out, I don't see how it can be left out anymore. The discussion's been going on for 3 years at least, and I don't see how it can be left out.
Got it.
Paula, I don't want to cut you off, but maybe I can help.
No, that's all I have to say.
We met with Maura Collins, and that was follow-up to our meeting with Regina Mahoney, and we have been, on the trustees, very aware, acutely aware of the need for more affordable housing in the village. And our thought was, after meeting with Maura, was that this should probably be a joint meeting with, a joint effort with the town. And the process that we're going to do is Elaine and Lori, and we were going to probably talk to the Selectboard tonight during sort of, if we get to the point of sort of open discussion, about if some of them would like to join with us in having a kind of an informational meeting with the manager to begin the discussion of having either a housing committee, whether that might lead to an affordable housing trust fund, or some communities have that as a strategy. Others put just more effort into creating more affordable housing. There are various strategies, and so that is something that we anticipate getting to go. Whether that's actually going to become a goal for the manager is something that the boards would have to decide. It's possible, but I think that's where we are right now.
Exactly.
Evan.
For the select board members who were not at the village trustee meeting, there was Maura Collins who came to talk about doing an assessment first, and then the question was, does the village and the town want to work on this together?
Right.
That is the point you guys were not here for. That would have been the discussion. I would suggest not putting that as a goal of the manager within the next 6 months.
Yeah.
It's not going to occur. It's not remotely going to be up and running in any way, shape, or form within the next 6 months, and therefore, I would suggest, since we have to do goals together, we do things that are achievable and are in the SMART goals genre. I appreciate the suggestion, but maybe for next year or future years, but to put it on the manager, since it's a policy discussion and something that's not even in my control.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we wouldn't, I don't think, and I meant, it's possible, but I think that we anticipated that if we set it up, we would not want to just put this as a body of work on the manager to do. It would be on a committee, and it would be maybe staff and citizens to carry it forward, and they would have to do the work. Manager would be involved, manager would have some oversight, but I can't, as Evan just said, it would make him responsible for the success of something that's not under his control.
Exactly.
But it's a big issue. I mean, it's not just village and town, it's regional, and it has to involve the schools as well, because it's an impact on that too. So it's a big conversation, absolutely has to happen.
And the schools were even here, one of the members of the school board was here saying, hey, if you are gonna take this up, the schools would be interested.
Actually, that person was not a member of the school board.
Oh, I thought
He was just suggesting
Oh, suggesting.
that we.
Thank you, I thought you were
Yep.
the school board. And we're a little off topic, but I also mentioned that based upon what is occurring in the organizations, our plate is quite full. And I think there's been an acknowledgement of that. So I'm very leery of taking on major initiatives based upon what we're doing now too. But I think if it's done correctly and thought of in ways that staff's involvement is more of a support role than a lead role, maybe.
So it's on our radar, but it may not become. Any other comment? Paul, I don't think you had a chance to speak on this topic.
No, it's just a question, it sounds like it's not going to be accommodated this cycle, but assuming that it has been talked about in the past, and that is affordable housing, what were the first thoughts as to who was going to fund this? Was this going to be taxpayer dollars? Was this something from the state of Vermont or federal government?
As I said, we're going to have just a group get together and just have an informal discussion about that, because we don't know. We can't give you an answer for that right now.
I don't know yet.
Yeah.
But you are sensitive to it. I mean, one speaker did speak about how expensive it is to live in Vermont.
Yep.
And just adding more and more taxes doesn't quite have a ring to it.
No.
Thank you, Paul. Anybody else? Okay, then we're gonna move on to our last.
We need to do a motion.
Oh, yeah,
Andy has it.
right, okay.
And Andy has a question?
Yes, Andy?
No, I was just going to propose, give you a motion.
Go for it, okay, yeah.
I move that the select board amend the memorandum of understanding to extend the 2018 deadline for establishing, defining, and prioritizing goals and performance objectives until August 1st.
Second.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Thank you,
No,
Larry.
first.
Yuck, yuck. Okay, any further discussion on approving that option one? Okay, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oh, I did it again.
I was watching.
Motion has 4-0. Thank you, Warren.
That's her legislative
I know, I just.
position, she's just,
Sorry, I'm sorry.
overwhelmed with the.
Trustees are here, same motion, similar motion.
Same thing Andy said, only for trustees instead.
Second. Oh, go ahead, Dan.
Who seconded it?
Dan.
Okay, now Lori, this is when you get to vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, good, we're on. We're moving on.
So we're gonna move on to our last business item, which is 5D, and that's discussion of next steps for governance, structure, options, and timeline. Evan or Greg, do you wanna kick that one off?
I think I'll take I think, based upon comments and commentary, let me take a step back. Both boards have had excellent meetings, and I commend you for that. I think the first three, these first three meetings have been very productive, very collegial, and have come out with some very good direction to staff. I believe one of the major things that has come out is a goal, one community, one government. I believe it was 9 for 9. The real question is how, right? That's the process, that you all have decided that you're going to do, and staff is going to be there with you doing this. And governance is, the definition, as we stated earlier, is broadly termed, and we've been using it as many things. But I think one of the things that needs to be defined and worked on, and cannot be done in 1 hour increment meetings, is what's the body government, such as you are today, select board, village board, what's its composition, what's the voting, how does that all work? That needs to be brought before you with not so much thoughts, but what's allowed in the law, and what's not just a thought, but what's possible, and what's its implications. And to that effect, I was, Greg and I and Julie Miller-Johnson from Economic Development Commission were at a seminar conference today in Killington on many topics, but VLCT was there. And I asked Ms. Collins if she would be a resource for us to come to our next meeting and talk about, I mean, who else other than VLCT has seen mergers and sections and things like that, and they are legal, they are lawyers, et cetera, to come and talk about what's possible, because there's so many pieces to representation and board structure and having to take it down to Montpelier for approval. So the idea is that this discussion needs to be a priority, and a lot of things hinge on the two boards agreeing to have discussions and opportunities to look at different, the pluses and minuses of different systems. And it's not just representation, it's what they need. And as you potentially grow into one community, who votes? And in what district or in a totality at large has different meanings of what you're going and how you're going to operate long into the future. So just the idea of having that conversation a little bit tonight, and then letting you know that VLCT would be a resource we'd like to use to bring them here so that you can ask questions, and maybe even the public, about representation and form of government and what are those implications. We just weren't ready with them tonight because of the timing of meetings, and we have to actually schedule them, and the July meeting has a date, and so we'd like to bring them at the July meeting.
I think where we left off last time, I think I wanted to get a charter change onto the ballot in November, where we consolidate the two boards but maintain two separate charters. Could a consolidated village town board, basically all of us, execute both charters, keep the charters in place, and then work on everything else? But then it would alleviate some pressure from staff. It would maybe lock us more on target of what we want to do. And as I understand it, Evan, you talked with the village attorney, and I had one main concern with it, which was that that goes to tax and representation, and because we would have people from outside the village trying to execute the village charter and potentially expending village funds, that might not be acceptable under general statutes, that you just can't vote that. You can't just have voters decide we're going to do that. Within the framework of the Vermont Constitution, you may not be able to do that. And as I understand it, what Claudine, our new attorney, said was, she said, yeah, that's probably correct. It didn't smell like that would work. And probably to really get a solid answer would probably be significant legal research on her part, probably the part of another lawyer, and they might not even know the answer because it's probably unprecedented. So it might, and bottom line, there's no way to answer the question within a reasonable time frame. So that model is probably not going to work. And is everyone clear what I'm talking about?
Not at all. I don't know why a town outside the village people on an expanded board would be voting on village stuff. That
Well,
would
the
be up to
idea
the
was,
trustees.
the idea was that we would have two, we would keep both the charters in, both the village and the town charter in place. But the authority to execute the charter would go to this new consolidated board. Well, that was the model we had.
Well,
That's not the model I proposed.
that's what he proposed, right?
That's not my model.
Oh, well, no, I'm saying that was what was, I'm trying not to be personal and say I proposed it or you wrote. I'm just trying to say it was a proposal. And we thought that there was a flaw in it, and that was something that can't happen. So that basically doesn't look like it could happen. And something going the other way, or anything like that probably couldn't happen. And
And just as a precedence, didn't the school districts, when they merged, didn't that vote, accomplish that kind of thing, where suddenly this entity that's the new school board now takes on debt that the other school, and property that the other school districts own?
they have one
Is that
charter.
a-
Right, but
That also dissolved all the
they
charters.
dissolved all the existing charters.
Okay.
They exhausted all existing charters. Essex Town School Charter was dissolved,
different-
Essex Junction School Charter was dissolved, and they created a new charter entity. And the simplicity for the audience, the idea is that dissolving the village and town charters means you've got tens of millions of dollars worth of property and streets that you have to figure out where's the new charter you're gonna move this to. And that's the work that we're about, is trying to figure all this stuff out. And there's no way we can accomplish that. But the idea that the prospect before us is that we were gonna spend the next 3 or 4 years while administration is trying to consolidate or align services, that we were gonna try to solve this overarching problem. But at the same time, the select board has to keep executing its charter, its town charter, the trustees have to keep executing the village charter, and then we have to keep having joint meetings like this one, and it seems like it could potentially be an exhausting schedule to keep up for the next 4 years. I put the idea out there as a way of us seeing if we can't all come together and maybe cut the meeting times in half, and we could each execute both charters, and then also have a conversation about governance at the same time. It was just a thought. It was a way to take a shortcut, but it's not gonna work.
I would just like to suggest, I know that you talked to the village attorney and you talked to VLCT today. I think an even more knowledgeable source of information has not been mentioned, and that's the Secretary of State's office. And I would like to propose that we still, in spite of this realization that it may not be what we were able to do, we still have VLCT come to our July meeting, but we also have the Secretary of State's office come. Because if VLCT doesn't know it, the Secretary of State's office certainly will.
And maybe ask them before, like, we'll re-invite them, make sure they understand this is an option.
Right, give them some background as to what we're attempting to do, and they're already very familiar with, because there's lots of people from this community that have called them with questions about this process over the years, but
We could have both.
I would be much happier with that authority in the room.
I would just like to throw an idea, just one point out before we do that, because you brought up the issue of the school districts consolidating. And, I think some of us have a little bit of trouble, at least I have. What the school districts did was, what they did not do was say, we're gonna keep the Essex Town School District intact, and we're gonna move we're gonna move Westford and Essex High School in the village into the Essex Town School District. And the Essex Town School District just got bigger and everyone else went away. And I have a sense that some people think that maybe that's what we're talking about in terms of consolidation with the village and the town, that the town will basically just stay intact and will slowly dismember the village and move pieces of the village into the town, and that's consolidation. That's not what the school districts did. They created a new entity, and both sides moved all their stuff into that new entity. And I think that's a fundamental question that Diane?
Three sides.
Huh?
Three sides.
Three.
Westford
yeah.
too.
Westford.
Not two.
I'm sorry,
Three
include West.
districts.
Yeah, yes, I know. Well, it was 4 school districts. It was
Four, yes.
It was
but
Union 46, Westford, Essex Town, and Essex Junction.
3 municipal entities.
Okay. But the point is that I think that there's a fundamental question we need clarity on before we have VLCT, because we have experts come in, and if we don't have clarity, we could be, well, wait a second, that's not what I thought. So
maybe we want to make sure that we have some clarity on this is a fundamental question. What is it that we're doing? Do we think that we're creating a new chartered community and we're going to move everything into that new chartered community? Or do we think we're basically trying to figure out how to take all the stuff that's in the village and move it into the town? Does anyone have thoughts about this?
I do. I feel extremely strongly that and I've said this before, and I said it Tuesday night, and I won't bore everyone with what I said Tuesday, but I feel very strongly we need to do the same thing that the school districts did. We need to have one new charter for our community. And I will say it here because I said it Tuesday, I will no longer be voting to consolidate individual departments. We have to find this solution.
Okay.
I agree with Lori, new charter.
Okay. Irene? Andy? Yeah, Andy?
I have nothing new to add. Been well said.
It's just the path to get there is the question.
Okay. Yeah, that's the question. Irene?
And I've proposed at prior meetings a 10-member select board that's expanded. So the town charter stays intact for
Okay.
now. It just has a bigger select board. And the 5 village trustees become the people with the most acute knowledge of those issues, the experts, if you will. And the 5 people from outside the village are the experts in that district, but everyone votes at large on everything that's townwide. If there's an issue with EJRP or some other village entity, the former trustees, the still trustees, whatever they're called, votes on that issue. When the outside the village burning ordinance or something else that right now has no board to administer it comes up, there will be 5 people from outside the village who, for the first time in 125 years, can actually legislate appropriately on those types of issues.
What kind of charter? A new charter?
That depends
An
on
old
what
charter
needs.
with, but the specific.
I'm flexible, whatever the lawyers tell us, and I was hoping the lawyers would be here this month, and hopefully next month, and I hope that we won't wait till VLCT has an opening in September. I really hope you will call far and wide and have whatever expert you can find here on July, because if I'm driving back from vacation, I don't want to not have an attorney here, just to be clear. This is something that's really important to do and to do soon, in my humble opinion.
Andy?
So as part of, or as an alternative to your proposal to have.
Speak up, please, Andy.
Yep, thanks Bruce, thanks for as a alternative to George's proposal, at the last meeting, I had suggested that there's an alternative way to possibly do this that I don't know if it would be legal or not, which was why you need the experts, is the state legislature gives municipalities the ability to contract with other municipalities to provide services. So if we form a union municipal district between the town and the village to govern that entity, it may be a way to do what George proposed without a charter. We could do it with but it has all the whole, we went through this union municipal district thing before and it had its issues. But it may be a way to look at this. I'm not advocating for it, but I'm just saying that may be a way to get there.
Evan put, I thought I did ask that question, and you also had several times asked, are there special rules for consolidating libraries? And I said, I wrote those up and I gave them, and Evan sent them to the village attorney, and she just gave very casual, because we didn't want to say, do full board legal research on this. I mean, it was one of these things, we kind of put her in an awkward position. Give us your first blush response. And so her response first for the library, she said, yes, she believed there would be some, she can't say unqualified, but there would be some special rules about consolidating libraries. But she would need to look into it more. But on the municipal district, she said, why would you want to do that? And I don't know, I think that she wasn't clear why that would be. It seemed like, I think what her response was, it seems like a more complex thing to do
than to simply do a merger and a new
Well,
municipal charter.
it would be potentially the temporary.
To keep the two charters
To keep the
intact.
two charters intact, having Union Municipal District that allows you but if it works this way, to work together, the two boards could, Union Municipal Agreement of the Municipal District, getting tied up in my own words here. If you're allowed to do so, have them act together as a single entity with special circumstances, of course, to address representation and taxation and all those kind of things, as a temporary measure, so that you can have that single board scenario without a new charter, if it's possible, and if you could ever work out all the details.
I think that would be a question for the attorneys. And I would want to get to your point, Irene, I think we'd want to try to get these questions nailed down as much as possible, because I don't think there's any attorney's going to say, oh, I know the answer, but they're going to need time, significant time to come back with an answer.
So I might suggest that you pose questions to me over the next, say, week, and I will send that on to whoever, Secretary of State and VLCT, as specific questions to be addressed that evening.
But I would like to just also throw out the question to both boards about process. We had, in setting the agenda up last week, and looking at realistically at the schedule for the rest of the summer and then moving into the fall, even if we get answers, we get some specific answers from the attorneys and so forth. Going forward, is the full board process right now moving, is this good? Or, because we had talked about the possibility of setting up maybe a subcommittee, a couple of selectmen, a couple of trustees, to look into some issues, do some research, get some ideas, and then come back to the boards and then bring it out also for public comment. And not that the public wouldn't be able to attend the subcommittee meetings, but is that a way, again, just to sort of take some of the pressure off staff of maintaining and this joint meeting process at a high tempo for the next year or so? Is there some other way we could approach this to move fast and light and get some answers and flesh out some ideas and then come back to the boards?
That was sort of what I was hoping we would come up with specifically for that reason. I'm really concerned about the amount of work we're putting on the staff. And we don't really, until very recently, use the tool of subcommittees because we're small boards. But when we're two boards together, it's more feasible. It would be awesome to have VLCT come here and the Secretary of State's office come here and have a public forum with questions that we can all answer. Perhaps there could be a subcommittee of board members that compiles the questions and starts the research so that the staff doesn't have to. I mean, it's too much, but it's also incredibly urgent, so.
So you're proposing
I prefer the subcommittee
to
approach
research
myself.
and present options for governance structure
Yeah,
at a time.
yeah.
I just also want to say, in a previous discussion with Evan's goals, it was like, there was some underlying assumption that Evan was hired and has a goal of consolidating, and that, I don't see, that's not Evan's goal.
No.
And Evan's job is to manage the two communities. It's our job to consolidate.
Policy.
And it's our
Absolutely.
job to make these decisions. And the responsibility should not be placed on Evan's shoulders. So I think that if we can hopefully move forward and organize ourselves and have staff and keep it to a minimum, not that they wouldn't be welcome, but to sort of shift it, to make sure that we're not saying you set everything up for us. And if ultimately we need lawyers and we need an expert, we're the ones who figure out who to call and we bring them in. And we don't say, Evan, go get us, go find us somebody, because that puts a lot of, again, that's just my thought. Irene, what do you think?
You're the one who's paying them. I mean, I just think that's a little awkward for us to be out on the market hiring attorneys. I don't know if that's proper process, but you can speak to that, not me.
I don't think we need to start with our personal attorney, our village and town attorneys yet. Let's go to the Secretary of State and start with them, and because they have the most intimate knowledge of the things we're discussing, and that's free. We could go make an appointment there. There's multiple experts in municipal law. We could go sit and talk for hours and get answers to questions that board members submit ahead of time, explore options, get our warnings, find out everything that we shouldn't be doing, and then bring it back to the board. That's what subcommittees do.
So in addition to sending questions Evan's way to be able to send to VLCT and
Yeah.
Secretary of State, do we want to do a subcommittee then to work on,
I think that's
to
a
do
better
the
way to go.
research and present options for the board to discuss?
I'd be happy to do that.
And maybe give yourselves the extra month and bring it, and not have it at July meeting and have it at the August meeting, and give the subcommittee time to
I'm on vacation during the August meeting,
Yeah.
and I'm really far away.
We don't have to, that's the problem, we can't get all this done in the summer, we have to
Right.
kind of take a break.
I think it's
the
a
next 6
realization
months.
that November, because if there was going to be a ballot question, it would have to be done by Labor Day, or at the earliest, end of August. I don't think you're ready for it.
I just think I guess that's the whole point of trustee. I think that a ballot question at this point, to me, if you can't get it ready if we can't have it by September, then it's not gonna happen. And I don't think we're gonna get something coherent
No.
onto a ballot by
Yeah,
September.
No.
So I think that we keep the discussion up, but I don't know, I think take the pressure off ourselves to try to get something on a November ballot.
I agree.
I agree, I think the subcommittee would be a great way to go. In terms of the whole ballot piece, I know I brought this up before, and when I was mentioning it, I was referring to the 2020 November ballot, not the one coming up
Not the one
this
coming up.
November, because no, I don't think that we'd be anywhere near that far.
Okay.
Okay, so if we agree on a subcommittee, then what should the makeup be?
Well, I don't want to keep delaying things, but we each have another meeting. We each have an individual, we have a trustee meeting. You've got a select board meeting before our next joint meeting. And I don't know maybe at each of our meetings, we could kick around ideas, see who's really got the burning desire and what do we want to have the subcommittee look like. You two could do the same, and maybe have a couple of different suggestions in our next joint meeting, make a decision. Do you want to do that? Or do you want to decide right now? What's everyone's pleasure?
I mean, it's probably either, one village trustee and one select board, or two and two. I think it's that's choice, right?
I would suggest 2 and 2, if we were going to do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then why don't we do that then? At the next village meeting, you can decide who the two would be.
Is that good?
At the select board meeting, we can do the same.
Is there a reason we can't do it tonight?
I think it might be good for us all to spend some time thinking about it.
Plus Mike will probably be back. for the
Yeah,
next one.
and I know Mike said he'd like to be on that committee, so it'd be nice to have him be able to weigh in. If there's 3 of us that want to be on the committee, it'd be nice to have that conversation.
Can I mention one other thing? I'm trying to I know that we go on about tax equity, because really, from our perspective on the trustees, that is so much of why we're doing this. It's really it's so fundamental to why we're doing this. And I know you've raised the issue of representation for people outside the village. And I'm questioning, I try to wrestle with specifically what are people outside the village concerned with. And maybe just a suggestion for the select board to think about is you can't create a committee of people that's just outside the village, because you can't exclude village taxpayers from your committees. But maybe you could create some kind of make some kind of an effort or committee where you ask people outside, or you try to assess what's concerning to people outside the village. What are they concerned about looking at consolidation? What don't they understand? What are their fears? What would they like to achieve? We have that. I think as a trustee, I have a pretty good understanding of what people in the village like and don't like and what they think, but I have to say, I don't have a sense of what folks outside the village, and you've raised this issue, so I just throw it out there as an observation for you guys to wrestle with. But maybe down the road, that might be a task that you could achieve and get some understanding of what folks outside the village are looking for to have happen with consolidation and not have happen.
So as far as this subcommittee, we want to do it, so,
Yep,
but we're not going to choose them tonight.
we won't choose tonight, so we can talk about it at our next meeting.
And have
each
Mike
of the
involved in
meetings.
that conversation, but we should do a motion to say we want to do that.
Okay.
And before we do that, though, I'd like to invite the public.
Yeah.
We do?
Yep.
Okay, is there anyone out there that would like to comment on our business item 5D about next steps? Jerry, and then Bruce.
Gary Fox again. Lori, I'd like to ask you what you think is wrong with the current town charter.
I honestly, I don't know, but I think we've tried to do this so many times, and I think the school district did it right, where they said, we're going to be a new entity, all one together, and we're gonna figure out how to do it together. And that's why I feel very strongly. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the town charter or the village charter. It needs to be a new charter.
Agreed.
I guess I don't understand, but go ahead. As long as I've lived here, a long time, I've always felt like we were one community. And the village folks wanted some additional services and were willing to pay for them, so they formed a village. Now, I gotta admit, when the high school was built, that fell apart. The village wanted the town to go in, I think it was 50-50, and the town folks outside the village couldn't see that. They felt like they didn't have enough kids to pay 50% of the taxes. Some folks didn't agree with that, but others, the majority, felt that. So I just don't see why you need a new charter if you're just consolidating all the services back under, how do I say this? Under single department heads, not necessarily under town department heads, but a single department head, because you really want the best guy, whether he's in the town or the village, or because you go by the last man standing principle, or however each individual department is done. So I just
So, and I really appreciate that, and I appreciate the fact that you do believe we are already one community, Gary, but there's a lot of people who don't, and there's a lot of ill will that has occurred over the previous merger attempts.
Oh, yeah.
Where, you know, if we continue with the process where we're going and consolidating individual departments, they will end up under the right department heads, because all of our department heads do a very good job.
Mhm.
But if they're all going to become town employees, and as villagers, we're saying, but that's not how it should be. We should be one. The people I've talked to, we need to be one community. And if we just get eaten up by the town, what does that mean? And we had the same conversation when we were talking about recreation. You know, the town recreation department, at EJRP in the village was bigger. The town didn't want to be eaten up by the bigger entity. It wanted to have a new entity. So I appreciate your viewpoint, and I'm sure there's a lot of people who don't agree with me, but that is how I feel about it.
Thank you.
Bruce?
Yep. A couple things. What is your authority for doing what you're doing now with all this alignment, consolidation? What's your legal authority to do that?
We're elected, and we have the power
You are
of
restrained by
policy.
what your charter and state law said, so just the fact that you're elected doesn't mean you can do anything you want.
Right, within the laws of the charter and the state of.
Is there a law that says we can't do what we're
Yeah.
doing?
Well, I was told when we were on the board we were operating under something called intermunicipal agreements. Okay, that's what and there are union districts too. And I think that's something VLCT can talk about, or some attorneys, because that's what I was told. We were using the intermunicipal agreement to do these things, which are now 2 municipalities to agree on certain services and how they're going to portion costs. And that may answer your question about what's the authority, one municipality contracting with another to do things. So I think we need to be clear on that. And Laurie, by the way, I agree with you. Subcommittees, will they be subject to the open meeting law?
Yes, and they'll be warned.
Yes.
Because I think when we had a subcommittee to negotiate the MOU for the $200,000 for the fire truck, they were held privately. So I want to make sure that subcommittees operate under the open meeting law, that they're announced and people can.
Even though they're not going to be a quorum of members of the board, we still want, they'll still be warned and open.
Okay, and
I think
that's,
that was an agreement of the boards, that they would be an interpretation
Yes.
by the Secretary of State.
okay, then that's it. So, again, intermunicipal agreements, you might have checked back, but that's my understanding, and there are certain procedures you have to follow under that, and it can enable you to do a number of things, and I hope what you're doing now does come under that. I have questions about it, and thank you for the answer on the subcommittees.
Thank you, Bruce. Betsy?
So Betsy Dunn, Essex County. So I think 4 years ago, I've been 3, but 4 years ago, we had a governance day down at the high school. Max, I believe you were there, and Irene, I think you were there. I can't really remember. And, pardon?
Almost all the trustees and select board.
Yeah.
I was not there.
We talked about governance then, and we talked about different forms of governance then, and I would encourage you to go back and look at that, because I think you got a good cross-section of town and village voices there, just as a leading thing to go into this. Plus, several years back, we tried to do another merger of the town and the village, and I think you have a template there that you can work from, and maybe there are things you'd like to change looking back on it. So I don't think you have to recreate the full wheel. There may be new spokes that you need to kind of pull out and amend for what you think it should be now. But I would like to see, if you can do this before November, which I don't think you have time to do, but at least by March. Because again, it's a setup time for the voting. You don't have to have a special vote where it costs that much more money to do the process. And I do agree with Gloria. I think we do have to have one charter for all of us to live under, and one representation format, whether it is select board, or call it a trustee board, or it's just a board, or is it wards? You know, do we have districts within the full town of Essex, whatever it's going to be called? But, you know, that's really important, because it makes it so that it's clarity. If I know that there's, let's say there's 20,000 people, maybe a few more, Elaine, and you have, so you say 2,000 per each person to represent, 2,000 people. So each area, a little bit of gerrymandering maybe, but you have to figure out the areas, but you've got 10 people or 10 people voting on this board, so you could have 10 districts. Same thing, but it would be a full representation. Everybody feels represented, everybody has a fair representation. There's not more from one or the other. It's not people from outside the village or inside the village. It's just the community. And I think it's really clear. It doesn't even have to be on political lines. It's just people they know they want to have represented.
Thank you, Betsy. Anyone who hasn't spoken yet? Okay, I'm going to go in the corner here.
Jerry, so we got here.
Yeah, back in the back corner.
Mary Lou Hurley. I agree with Lori. I think we do need a new charter. I'm sure people get very attached to the charter that they have, but I think it's really clear that it has to be a whole new charter. Just support you in that.
Thank you. Anyone else who hasn't spoken? Paul?
Yes, I just want to put to rest people outside the village are very concerned if the board isn't balanced. And we do believe that it can be balanced, it's not against the law, and maybe you want to give it 5 years for that 5 and 5 goes away. One issue. Number two, one of the concerns, justifiably or not, and I mean this kindly, if the village decides to build a water park to the tune of $1.5 million, and they vote it through, and I'm outside the village, I'm paying part of that. I would dare say that's what kind of defeated the recreation, pulling it together. Our taxes were going up. I believe in consolidation. I really do. I have a concern that if we continue to consolidate various departments, we're going to get to a point it is inefficient, more expensive. I think that the village needs to take a look at its charter. Do they want to give up the ability to tax? Buy those things that the town feels it cannot afford to keep the tax rate down. And we have a new charter where the town does the taxing, cleans all of the revenue, and then it's be able to allocate it to where it's needed. Amen.
Okay, thank you so much, Paul. Anyone else who hasn't had a chance to speak yet on this topic? Okay.
Chair.
You want another crack at it? We haven't been allowing two, but if it's quick, Jerry, please.
I would argue that the authority to do this is the approval of the town and the village budgets, where everybody knows that this budget is based on proceeding consolidation. If the consolidation's passed, then what's going to happen?
Okay, thank you, Jerry. Okay, I'm going to move it back to the boards. Irene?
I would request that as an act of good faith, that the boards only appoint an equal number of people from both districts, so to speak, to this governance committee, so that there are equal teams looking at this issue from both sides.
I think that was an assumption going in.
Andy? We're going to have that discussion.
Have that discussion.
Yeah, we'll have that discussion. I mean, the trustees are going to be from the village.
Yes, but Mike is also from the village and he's on selectmen, so
Right,
if
but
we're going to be
that's the
appointing.
select board's discussion at our meeting.
It is,
But
I don't want him to have the expectation he's going to be appointed if the trustees are appointing the only trustee.
I don't think he has that expectation. He volunteered.
He said he'd be happy to throw his
Right.
hat in the ring. Yeah. Okay, is there a motion that we could do to form the subcommittee?
I'll move that the select board appoint 2 members to a subcommittee to explore governance.
Okay. Do I have a second?
No, second.
Okay, thank you, Randy. Any further discussion on forming a subcommittee to research and present options for governance structure and timelines to the rest of the boards?
I just have a question for Mr. Watts, because at some point you indicated at a prior meeting that you weren't against subcommittees. Will you be willing to serve on this one, for example?
Depends on when you're going to do it.
But you're not opposed to the subcommittee idea itself?
I'm not crazy about it. Strange to get this grilling here, but.
Well, I just want to clarify before we go into a meeting and find out that there's
Yeah.
nobody from the outside the village to fill those 2 potential seats.
Well, I thought we were going to have that discussion later, but I think it would be illegal for us to rule out Elaine and Mike from being on that committee, because they're duly elected as much, they're as eligible to be on that committee as I am. But that's the discussion we were going to have ourselves, amongst ourselves. And so I'm a little concerned, I guess, now that you've brought this up, about voting to form this committee if we're going to have the inability to come to any agreement as to how we're going to form it in our own meeting, so.
Well, we said 2 and 2, and I think we have to assume we're gonna find a way, at least have that discussion. We don't, but I think we will. Okay. All right, so we have, you made a motion? Who made the motion?
I made a motion.
You made the motion?
Andy
Okay.
seconded.
Andy seconded. Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes 4-0.
Do I hear a similar motion for the trustees?
So moved, except instead of select board.
Yeah, I mean, I was just gonna say the same thing, but just, I moved that the trustees appoint 2 members to committee to research governance issues, consolidation, and come back to the board with suggestions.
I'll second and withdraw my previous motion.
And I'll just add in discussion, if it turns out in our discussion in our next 2 board meetings that the 2-person committee thing isn't gonna work and you want to adjust it, again, the only aggrieved parties are sitting here at the table, so there's not a higher authority that's gonna get upset. So if that doesn't work out, then we can make some kind of an adjustment. But for now, let's see if we can't keep it to a 2-person committee, okay?
4-person.
4-person, well, 2 from each side.
Master George.
Yes, okay, yeah. I think it might be a point of order when we've got a,
Right,
we have a motion on the table, Irene. Not that I know, absolutely want to hear what you have to say, but I think I need to call unless another trustee has a comment within this. All in favor?
I just,
Oh, yeah.
I did one quick comment.
Yeah.
I do find it unfortunate that we can't do it tonight, as what we heard earlier today is that staff are weary of additional initiatives. We also heard earlier today about a desire to do additional things, such as an affordable housing committee, whether it be an affordable housing trust fund. We also talked about other things that we'd love to try to do. And I find it unfortunate that until we solve this big issue of governance, we've got to keep pushing things further back, and we're going to push this conversation of governance to study it another month back. I understand why, it's just an unfortunate thing.
What do you mean another month back?
We can't pick the 4 people now.
Well, I think the select board's not ready to pick the people, and so I think it might be, and I think until our next joint meeting and we have it all set up, then the committee wouldn't be able to do anything. I don't think we're necessarily putting it back.
If we could define the 4 people today, tomorrow a doodle poll could go out, we could find dates. The meeting could happen as soon as a week or 2 from now, maybe even after the 4th of July, I don't know. All I'm saying is I totally understand why.
Yeah.
It's just unfortunate that it still has to wait.
I get you.
Can I add on to that as well? Thank you, Andrew. I just think we need to all be realistic in what we're trying to do.
Right.
And to me, honestly, doing a housing committee right now is more important than this.
Right.
Because we've done a lot. And Evan and his crew have a lot to do to further align what we've done. So as much as I want to stop paying taxes on services that are duplicative to villagers, I think we need to just take a breath and say, what are we trying to achieve, in what timeline? Because if we can't even pick a subcommittee, how in the world are we going to do governance? So I would like to add to the motion, not to the motion, but I would like to add that the trustees have a conversation at our next meeting on what we think is realistic and other priorities that we've been putting off in the village that we feel really are important and need to get done.
Couldn't agree with you more, Lori. But I think the thinking of having a subcommittee is that this would take the place of these joint meetings.
Which would be great.
For the next 6 months, so that the subcommittee would be able to keep the conversation going and not have to have full board joint meetings going. So
let's outline that, I guess. So let's make sure we're all on the same page when we figure out what the subcommittee is, what we expect, timeline that we expect.
That's why I think it's probably a good idea to put more formative discussion off until our trustee meeting, and the select board can do the same, so what they expect out of the subcommittee. Is it okay? Evan has raising his hand in the middle of our.
Just for clarification.
Yeah.
The next meeting is scheduled for.
27th.
Pardon?
The joint meeting is
The next joint meeting is the
July
18th to the
17th.
17th, if we can agree, it's the day. 17th, okay. Is there still going to be a July meeting? Irene is coming back from her vacation to be here at that. And if so, there is going to be a meeting on the 17th. Are we to have the Secretary of State and the VLCT here I want to be clear, because this is the summer, people are thinking,
Right.
if you want it in August, we'll do it in August, but I just.
Evan, let me stop you. We have a motion on the table that the trustees need to vote on. You're digressing a little bit. Let's go back, we're gonna get right to that.
Okay.
But let's get
I
through the
apologize,
trustee
sir.
motion first,
I
okay?
apologize.
Dan?
No, I just,
He moved,
I
he
moved, he seconded
All
it.
in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Evan, you're on.
What would you like, a July meeting, and if so, what do you want on that agenda? If not, do you want to skip July and go to, what's the board's pleasure?
It's open to the board.
Can I ask a
Go ahead.
question?
Sure.
Are there other business items that the two boards need to do together in July or August?
Who's goals? It's goals.
Evan's goals, anything else?
Public Works,
Public Works,
Sign the agreement.
Sign the agreement.
The governance, the definitions.
Well,
and
right, which that's just.
I know.
Okay, what I was trying to get at
Bigger,
was,
so we have a need.
we do have a need,
So wait, we have a reason for a July meeting. Is governance gonna be, with the subcommittee's report, update, or is it going to be in August if there's no pressure of going to November ballot?
I'd like to make a suggestion. We hold the July meeting to do the business that we all just piped up about. We skip the August meeting. We let the governance committee do their research and report in September.
So July is goals and MOU.
Contract.
And
And
MOU.
contract of Public Works. August is off, no meeting in August. September is governance.
That's what I recommend.
Does that
With,
sound
with
good?
consult,
That's fine.
you know, with consultants,
Right.
input, et cetera, from the subcommittee.
Everybody okay with that? Yeah, all right, sounds like we got some head nods.
Greg, you got all that?
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's it for that one.
Do we have a September date, though? I thought we were doing every other for a while. So
No,
we may
we
need
were
a doodle for
doing every
that.
for
I
a
just
while.
wanna make sure that we have a September. I think we were just doing every other.
Let me pull up
Thanks.
September.
I thought we did.
Yeah, I thought we did every,
Yeah, I think we have a series of,
Andy was reluctant to.
I don't know if you have one in September, but we can schedule.
Thank you.
You can set it up. You can doodle it and make it happen.
Okay, good. All right, so should we move on to the reading file?
Sure. Is that, are we good?
Can
Are we
I
good?
just say one thing?
Yeah.
According to our meeting schedule on Tuesday, July 18th
18.
is the next meeting.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that
Thank you.
we all are good with that.
We have July 18th, August 22nd, October 11th, and December 5th, so we don't have a September one. And I think that was intentional, because there's Labor Day, and, because we did work out this schedule together as a group, so.
I think October is realistic for a subcommittee, honestly. I don't
That's
think
fine.
September is.
Okay.
That's fine.
So you will meet in July, and then your next meeting after that will be October.
Right. And in the meantime, the subcommittee will presumably begin some kind of a conversation, and they may be meeting, but the full boards won't be meeting, or maybe not.
Okay, can we move on to reading?
I'm sorry, so are we meeting in September or just until October?
Sounds like we're meeting in October.
I think October.
So
July and October?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. So I dare ask, could we move on to reading it?
Is that good for you? Meeting in October?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
All right. Comments on the reading file? Anybody? I don't have any comments. Yeah. Let's go. It's getting late. Okay. Everybody all right with that? Then there's no executive session required, I'm aware of, so can we have a motion to adjourn then?
So moved.
Thank you. Any second?
Second.
Thank you, Elaine. All those in favor of adjourning, signify by saying aye.
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 Trustees?
Move adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
I was tempted.
Okay.
Very good. Thanks to the